All right, hello and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. I think we are live right now with Dave and Yorai and myself, Jason. We're here to talk about Unity game development, just general game development, answer a bunch of questions, and probably have a little bit of fun. Welcome, guys.
Oh yeah,
Sorry, Dave was making me crack up right before we got started.
that's what it's all about.
Having a hard time concentrating now. So yeah, I just want to say welcome everybody out there and chat with us and watching later. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, share the stream, and if you have questions, just start asking away. Drop them into chat, and we'll see if we can go through a couple of them and try to give you the best answers that we can. I've got a couple of them already start up, but I wanted to first just make a couple really quick announcements. First, we got GameDev Guild coming up in 4 weeks. Just go to gamedevguild.com or check the link down in the description below if you're interested in that. It's an online conference and we're talking about game development, mostly Unity stuff. Got a bunch of really interesting speakers. Actually, just talked to another one this morning that I think you guys will be really excited about if you're into Unity stuff. I don't want to spoil it though. And yeah, that's it. So go check that out if you're interested in it. Other than that, I think we can probably just get started. You guys have anything you wanted to share or announce or just make known? Any new videos or anything that people should know about?
I had a take at trying to make a video. I can't share how well this went, but I managed to get a passing grade from Jason's story, so yay.
Nice.
Yorai's new YouTube announcement.
No.
Now a Twitch streamer too. He's doing Twitch and YouTube, right? In TikTok?
No. Also, so the first time I tried to record a video, I looked so nervous that it was like I was being held at gunpoint, and that was extremely awkward and difficult to fix. So after getting roasted by Jason Story's entire Discord server, I had a different take, and I ended up putting a small figure over the camera so that I could try and speak to that instead of looking like I'm held at gunpoint and looking away from the camera, like trying to not make eye contact. So I ended up putting like this tiny figure.
Okay,
well,
like a little target you can talk to.
Yeah, just a Final Fantasy figure that I got like really early on.
Cool.
Yeah, it just stayed on the camera. I tried to talk to that. It didn't work at all, but I eventually got used to talking to the iris of the camera, and it looked kind of passable in the end. Apparently, I had to do a lot of adjusting to my pose.
Yeah, that's one of the harder parts is like feeling comfortable on there. But oh, weird, Dave's stream is having problem. But I think it's important that everybody tries it though. Like it's cool that you're actually starting to make the videos. Like, and you said that you did 2 takes on it, and the second one was quite a bit better.
Yeah, so the first time it was like more like 20 takes, and then I cut them up properly using Adobe Premiere Rush. But the second time I tried to do it in one go. It went kind of okay. Then I realized that I had some issue with the audio, and I did the entire thing again, but with 2 goes, with one checkpoint where it was like I kind of knew my pose and what word I was about to say next, so I continued from there.
Nice. I find like more times you do it, the better it comes out. Like I always hate when I have to redo a video, especially when I record one and then go back and realize that my microphone was muted or my camera was off.
Done that.
And I'm like, no, I go back, I'm like, this is terrible. But the end result always ends up better because the things that like you had to think through, you've already thought through multiple times, and it kind of becomes a lot more natural. It starts to flow quite a bit better. So I think that's
second nature, trying to explain to someone who didn't hear it the first time.
Yeah, I always recommend just do lots of takes or lots of videos.
Yeah.
So is your video coming to YouTube? You're right. That's the question coming up.
I don't know, maybe, but not on my channel.
Sometime maybe.
Subscribe and like, but not for my channel.
Well, there were a couple questions that came in already. If you guys want to start just answering some, are you guys up for that?
Yeah.
So, let's go in reverse order. I'll take the one that I starred last. Do you need to be great at art to have a game dev job? I'm terrible at art, so no. I thought that would be an easy one to answer.
No, you don't.
Definitely
Dave is great at
unnecessary.
art and has a game dev job. What would you say the ratio of good people at art is in game development? Like how is it like only the artists, or half of the designers and programmers are good, or most are good, or that most of them just kind of suck at it and the artists do it?
No, completely mixed bag.
About a quarter or less of any company will probably have people great at art, because there are so many disciplines in game dev that aren't related to art at all. QA doesn't need to be great at art. Programmers don't need to be great at art. All the auxiliary functions of the company don't need to be great at art, and they can still be involved in the game dev process.
I've met designers that have moved into art, and I've met artists that have moved into design. You don't need to be. And it depends what the game you're making is and stuff like that. Some games don't need fantastic art at all.
Might be
Look at
making
Wordle.
solitaire.
Yeah, Wordle, solitaire, all those sort of things. And also, you've got the asset store, which we bang on about every other week about how good it is. And you could just pick up your art there and build your game from that if you're not great at art. But no, you don't need to be. I got good at art because I worked as a tools programmer and had to work with the artists directly, making tools in Maya for them to use. And that's how I started in AAA game dev. And because of that, I learned to do art so I could be better at my job of making tools for artists. And that's how I got good at it. I mean, I could draw beforehand by hand, but my 3D modeling was so. But yeah, so that's how I got
good at it because you needed to do it.
Yeah, because I had to keep doing it. I had to use my own tools to make sure that I was going in the right direction, and then sit watching artists use my tools. It's one of those things you talk about whenever you make a game or you make anything. You want to sit and watch people using your thing without talking to them to see how they use it, to see what comes up. Don't answer their questions. Just let them get going on it. And I would do that a lot. And of course, I'd see these great artists working on 8 Days and Until Dawn and stuff like that, producing amazing work. And you just learn a few things.
Yeah. On that note, there are plentiful jobs being the tool dev. You don't necessarily have to be great at art for that either. It was specifically because you worked with artists. But there can be people who make tools for, say, making skills in an MMO, and they only care about making stats and editable sheets or whatever. So, absolutely not necessary to be great at art. It is a bonus, though, and it is very helpful when you can give somebody a working unit that's already kind of pretty, and they can just touch it up.
I want to pop up the next not question. This one was something that people have asked for. Everybody kept commenting, "Where's the timestamp guy?" And it was Corey. And he's been. I actually noticed last night. I went through and pinned a bunch of them. He started putting up timestamps on a whole bunch of stuff. So if you were looking for them, thank you, everybody. Just say thanks, Corey, in chat. Really appreciate that. That is awesome. Let's go to another question. This one is one about VR, Dave. So I wonder when the day will be when we look back at the VR headset tech and compare it to old cell phones that look like a brick. So essentially when it gets down to like eyeglasses or contacts or something similar.
There's going to be some of the form factor is going to be limited by just the fact is, you can get absolute miniature cell phones, but nobody has them because they don't want them. It's form meets function. And if you were around for the CV1 days, or even way back, the first time I done VR was in the early 90s. I'm going to age myself terribly. But in the early 90s, and it was a giant freaking headset. And if you ever seen the Nintendo Boy and all the rest of it, these giant headsets you had to put on and get into these massive not arena, but these massive like cages to move around and shoot just in a really boxy polygon world.
Yeah, because that's like supporting the headset weight, right? Yeah. It's too heavy to hold on your actual head.
Exactly. And then you move forwards to CV1 with Oculus. And that was a big headset. Don't forget, that was a big, heavy headset. It had a big-ass screen on the front of it, like a box that you would put on. And then that slowly came down to the CV1, which was about a year and a half or something like that after the first came out. And then it got even further.
Get one to the consumer one?
Yeah. And then once you go from now you're in the consumer phase of things, they've gone very, very heavy to the point of wearing a phone on your face and all the rest of it, to what I consider fairly light now. I mean, the Oculus Quest 2 is fairly light. And if you go for a wired headset, it's even lighter. And now they're starting to put the batteries on the rear of the head to start weighing it up and all the rest of it. It's getting there. I mean, I can see what people want. They want just a pair of glasses they stick on their face and all the rest of it. But one, your VR headset's going to have to give you blackout. It's going to have to cover your eyes because otherwise you'll get light leakage all around your face and that ruins the experience. So there's a certain size that they'll come down to, but won't get any smaller than that until we literally start putting things on our retina. So, well, not on our retina. Well, maybe on the retina, but straight on the
eye. You could just make the brightness of the VR headset just go up if you have ambient lighting coming in from the sides, but that's way too difficult a topic if you want to get just glass-sized VR.
Yeah, I mean, HTC put out something not too long ago, but it was more for relaxation and wellness. They called it like the wellness headset, playing on the idea of marketing, because the last 2 years all been about wellness. I mean, I've been hired by several people to make wellness things and look at wellness applications. And luckily my wife does yoga, so I was just sitting there making notes of what she was talking about, yoga and meditation and all the rest of it, so that I could then use that in the stuff I was doing. But HTC bought onto that and then produced something which was a lighter, smaller headset to move forwards with in the wellness space. I know somebody that is also a no VR, where they talk about actual rooms that immerse you, not your actual headsets. So you don't have to wear anything. Because a lot of people talk about the fact that if you're looking at especially a wellness application, having to wear anything while you're performing yoga or meditation or anything is a distraction in itself. So there you go. Long answer to a simple question. 3 years.
I got a less simple question if you want a more complicated one. I don't know the answer to. Is there a decent editor bone weight tool for Unity? I guess it's not really that complicated.
Not that I'm aware of. That said, they do actually have a weight editor. It's just a cloth weight editor. It's not for bones. And reading the second part, though, is kind of catching my eye, with the bone he wants to move being too long. So when we're discussing skinning for any particular skeletal mesh, the bone weights only say you move this much with this bone. So if this bone moves its position and you have 100% weight, then you will move exactly as much as that bone did. If it rotates, you will rotate relative to it as much as it does. If it's only half the weight, then you only move half as much as it moved from its rest position, only half as much as it rotated from its rest position. It's important to understand that, because if the bone is too long, it doesn't matter. Bones don't actually have length. What they do have is a position, rotation, and scale. So shortening a bone wouldn't do anything for your weights. The only thing it would do is it would move the positions of the children. And you can actually do this at runtime. You can move your bones and change their positions and see how it affects the model without needing to change any weights, because changing weights will only change how much it moves with the bone, not how the bone size doesn't matter at all. That's the point.
All right, let's take a non-bone question about debugging. When debugging, do you use any programs or methods that most game devs might not use and could benefit from knowing about? So let's just say, instead of assuming that most don't know about, go with like you just met somebody fresh out of college, and what's something that they might not know about or might not have used before, like they're junior dev coming in, so maybe it's something that they haven't seen before in your debugging techniques.
So I sat in a room the other day with a load of devs having a chat, and they'd all come into Unity. They hadn't been programmers before they started doing Unity development, and none of them knew that you could actually link with the IDE and start actually debugging right there
Are you kidding me?
Like attaching the debugger?
Yeah, attaching the debugger. Nobody knew about it. And part of that comes from, have you ever seen a Unity tutorial or any of those other tutorials where they talk about attaching the debugger? Because I was trying to think whether I had actually seen one where they spoke about the fact you could actually do that and start going through the code, or how to actually do that, or how to skip through, or how to step into, and all the rest of it. So weirdly, I'll start with the one that most of most of the game devs I know that I've worked with in the past know about, and that's the fact you can just.
I'm gonna make a video about that. I didn't even think about that. I have never made a video covering that, and it was one of the things I remember the first time I realized I could do that. I was like, "Oh, this is like magic! I know I could do this. This is freaking awesome!"
Yeah, setting up watches and actually putting in the debug links and actually having them as they'll only fire when these sort of conditions happen and all the rest of it in Visual Studio or whatever. He didn't know, and I sat there explaining it to him, and it blew his mind.
That's fair. So I just wanted to say, you did have videos where you did step through your code, Jason, but you didn't make a video specifically about it, I think. Yeah. Also, in regards to using the debugger, it's not the only way I would approach to debugging a game, because there are things that are more visual, and you can't do that with a stack trace or stepping through code. Instead, you have to start adding visualizations, either over your game or by the side of your game, or logging things over time. There are plentiful of ways that you can benefit from getting extra information out of your game view, regardless of what's going on in the game. For example, in Crash Bandicoot, in the remake, they added a display of the height compared to the floor whenever the character jumps, so that they could compare jump curves as they adjusted values. This kind of thing lets you really fine-tune how the game runs, and also if something goes wrong, you can see from those curves sometimes that there's a spike or an unintended value as you're trying to figure out the issue. Sometimes in Terraria, because we don't have plentiful functions for debugging, we would straight up add debug code to catch when a certain scenario happens, or trying to replicate it forcefully. Like, we knew some conditions bring into a bad case, so we can just rig the game to play the bad case for us, and then we can solve it there and remove the code afterwards. Or make debug commands that let us create stress test situations. For example, a few streams ago, I talked about how I had to figure out the max size of the world of the game. And the game has dynamic saving because we have 20 million tiles, and there's a lot of things that try to get batched. But in order to see the maximum size, I had to break batching for every single thing possible, and also increase the maximum size of all blocks. So I ended up having a dev command that says, hey, just do the worst possible world, set every single thing that breaks batching, set every single thing that adds extra data, and then save it. And even though the world was entirely unplayable, like 3 FPS on my beast machine, I ended up getting all the information I needed. So there you go.
You just make those as like special debug commands?
Yeah, so we have, I guess, a piece of code that checks for methods with attributes that are like debug command with the string that we have to place. And if there are arguments, we can use that. And then we just make a command, slap an attribute on it, and then in game we just type the thing we need, and works.
Yeah, that's a very handy pattern too. Something that people should probably be doing if you have a console at all like that in your game, or a more complicated game at least.
Here's another one specifically for Unity. You can actually, in the inspector, you can toggle the debug view, and then you can see serialized fields that are usually hidden.
And that's you right click and hit debug in the on the inspector tab to see that. You just got to turn it back off because you won't see the custom inspectors afterwards.
Oh. And when you've done your build, you can actually link to it with Unity and still do a lot of debugging there. Also, you've got your debug log, which everybody knows about, but some people don't realize you can have debug log warning, log error. If you're running on Android, somebody actually brought it up. Elegant Washer brought it up. elegant waster, my eyesight, I need new glasses. The fact that you can actually get a log cap viewer for the Android as well, which is quite a bonus as well. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of gizmos. If you haven't been using gizmos to line up some of your stuff, you can actually do drawing in your scene view and write your own as well. I have ones for things like Monkeys with Guns, a game I'm doing with a friend of mine. That has many little items that show red if he's doing things wrong when he's laying out the levels and when things are going to go wrong. And I have that come back to me. And you could go low tech, just put on a video recorder and record people actually playing your game and then watch it back so that when they say, oh, this went wrong, you can actually see exactly where that went wrong. And that's just a QA tip. But yeah.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I went on a international trip with some colleagues, and they're all coming down with COVID, so I booked myself a hotel just to see what happens.
Just to see what happens.
What if COVID gets you in there?
It won't get me in here, that's for sure, but who knows about the last week at this point.
So on the topic of debugging, there was this one tool in iOS Xcode instruments, I think it was. There was one really good debugging tool where you can actually see how much time is spent on your shaders instruction calls. So for visual debugging, performance stuff, this is great. I haven't used it myself, but I know that a lot of people really, really recommend it, specifically in the Unity space. It's like a lifesaver, apparently. Because the testing suite is way better than Android's, as far as I can tell.
Used to be able to insert things into the profiler as well. I haven't done it in a while, but you can actually insert elements into the profiler in your code that would actually profile sections when you're actually viewing the profile as well, if you're very specific about that. That's a deep one if you want to get into that as well. I'm trying to think of things that not everybody knows.
They've extended that out even more in 2022. There's a whole bunch more stuff you can add into the profiler too and watch now. But yeah, I think the breakpoints are like the number one people need to know about.
Yeah, breakpoints and debug assert sometimes is really helpful.
And there's also an option on your debug that you can debug on error, stop on error, pause on error. So when you're actually playing your game and something errors, the game will actually pause in the editor. And then you can actually see exactly what's wrong. Because I know some people, when they're doing it, they're like, oh, there was an error ages ago and they didn't know about it because they were concentrating on the game view and they weren't looking at their log, or their log was off. Where you can actually turn on that button that says, if an error gets logged, pause the game.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, I've set it on like once and I forgot it existed. And then I have a friend who's recently started a Unity course at university, and he didn't know it existed. And he had hell figuring out why one of his homework projects wasn't working. So when he pulled me in, it was really funny because I was like, can you just enable that box? And in less than 2 minutes, we already knew what's going on. So I guess that's also a useful tip.
So let's take this next question.
Yeah,
it's about how to build something or how to make an advanced compass in Unity.
With this next question, I feel offended.
Well, you weren't in the call when this question got asked. Only Dave was intentional.
Yeah, only I was intentionally skipped.
Hilton, you have no faith.
No. But does anybody have thoughts on this? So an advanced compass, this could be anything from like some showing up in game, pointing in the direction, or on screen, or even the little blue, squiggly lines. I'll
say this. How much would you say is an advanced compass? Because I've been comparing them a lot, actually. In Doom 2016, they actually had a whole 3D map where you can see like almost by half a meter accuracy the entire actual model of the world. As you ran around, you could like literally know if you're too high up, too far down. And then we have games where the compass is only 2D, so you could see things from the top. but they have icons that say, well, this icon that you're trying to go towards is actually above you, and they end up like an up arrow or a down arrow if you're above it, so that you know how to fall, or if you need to fall at all. And then there's compass systems like The Division and Genshin Impact, where in the world they draw things on the floor to guide you towards the path that you need to take. And those games, The Division, while it's mostly linear corridors, Genshin has like open world with climbing up walls. So how do you handle giving players path for that? What would you consider is an advanced compass in this case? Or a navigation system, I guess.
Let's just go for somewhere in the middle. Pointing, maybe 3-directional pointing to give you a direction of where you want to go. I think the footsteps and all that is, it's pretty well known. There's lots of videos on how to like show a path, in game, because that's essentially what they're doing. But just like the 3-dimensional like floating arrow or something, like what steps did you take to kind of get started on that?
Well, first off, you need targets.
Or maybe the one that shows the world in the back. I don't know. Whichever one you think is cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's just step through it logically. So you want to look for something. You have a compass. It needs either a target or a special awareness of where it is. Like if a normal compass only points to the north, you need to know where the north is compared to where you are looking, for example. So there are always 2 points at minimum, the one that you're looking for and the one that you're at. And then you get a difference from the two. If it's a difference in rotations, then you can get that. Or if it's a difference in positions, you can compare the positions. Like it's literally just 2 points in 3D space. You can literally subtract them and get from my point to that point. And then from there, all you have to do is display it in the way that you feel is most accurate. So a 3D arrow, in the literal sense, is just from my position to that position, decide the direction that I have to go, point that arrow there. If it's an arrow mesh that literally points forward by default, then just setting its rotation to that direction of from my point to that point, you're already done.
It looks like they're thinking of more an all-directional 3D compass. So I'm not
sure. So we already. Yeah, go ahead.
Are they talking about, like, I'm wondering how they're thinking of this as being displayed. Now, if you're talking about a 3D compass, now are we talking about like a sphere that rotates in a fixed corner of the screen, or are we talking about like that bar at the top that as you rotate, there's little icons showing bad guys up, bad guys down, the goals getting bigger and it's yellow as you get closer? Like,
what's the game type? Right? Yeah, what's the game type?
Yeah, it changes between Doom, Skyrim, and Elite Dangerous, so you really need to pick. But I guess there is one more point that's should be brought up, which is if you're trying to do showing off the target points in the screen, then it's really different, because an arrow is only like in a fixed position and only points towards the direction, but points around the screen might actually be behind you. So what do you do in that case? So Unity, in this case, lets you say screen point to world or world point to screen, and then you can know relative to the screen if a point is behind you, in front of you, how much is it in front of you, if it's off the borders of the screen, and then you can clamp its position so it always shows like somewhere on the screen, and if you rotate your camera, it will like stick on the corners. And if it's behind, then you can adjust it so it only shows like really to the side, so you know that it's not like showing on the center of the screen, but you're actually ahead of it. But there's a lot of extra stuff that goes into it, but it's mostly UI decisions. It's really not much in terms of calculations. The knowing where to go is the start.
It depends a lot on the type of game and stuff. Maybe we'll get back into it a little bit more and get some more details on that one too. I'm going to jump over to the next question about dots, though, which is, when is a good time to start learning it? It's a shame this wasn't asked last week when Johnny was here.
I'd say the best time to start learning it is before it's popular, so that you can be one of the big ones when it is popular.
What about you, Dave?
I mean, there's no harm in learning it now. It depends what time it is and what you're trying to achieve. If you just want to learn what dots is, you can get in there now and start playing with it and giving it a go. If you want to make a releasable product, then
I mean, there are games on Steam that already use dots. Hard Space Shipbreaker already uses it for all of its amazing, like flying in space, cutting and stuff up, and entering and exploding, and regretting every single moment you spent. But yeah, it's an experimental technology, so they don't recommend it for production, but you can use it for production. It's just, again, not recommended by Unity themselves. They're saying if you're bumping into a really difficult issue, we might not be able to help you, which is the whole premise of experimental package.
And they might change it. So you might go to another version and have to change a load of your code because they've decided to do something slightly differently.
What's this change you speak of? I'm on Terraria with XNA from something.
XNA since the dawn of time. But yeah, no, I mean, if you want to do something in dots, go learn it. Go start doing it. If you're thinking of doing a releasable product, as your SS, there's something out there now.
Yeah, I want to quickly I was trying to pull this up in the background. It didn't really show up, but one of the sessions at the GameDev Guild conference is actually going to be from the Dots team talking about exactly this, like what some of the scenarios are where it makes sense to start using dots, like kind of what those use cases are, where those edges are, where you might want to start pulling it in and using it, like where it makes sense to use it versus using the normal Unity workflow, like where you're going to see those performance benefits. So that was yeah, if you're interested in that, just check it out. They'll be talking about it. They're also going to make all of the Unity talks will also be available afterwards, available to everybody as well. The sponsored Unity ones will be up there, so you'll be able to find out about that even if you don't come. But if you want to come and find out quicker, just sign up at GameDevGuild.com.
There's something
a little plug in there while I mention it.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, and I really hope to see concrete use cases, because I myself have been teetering on the edge of, should I try and pull at least the jobs in burst in, which probably we should bring that up, but Dots is actually a composition of 3 different packages from Unity. The data-oriented tech stack is composed of the entity component system, which is the first one. Then we have jobs, which is basically multi-threading but easier for Unity. Well, it's not a Unity exclusive concept. It's just a new implementation that lets you multi-thread in Unity, where previously most of the code was single-threaded. And then lastly, there's Burst, which, basically speaking, is it's a compiler improvement where you can control how your data manipulation ends up and save on performance cost. But really, most people will just slap Burst attribute on the top and call it a day. So performance improvements, multi-threading, and then anti-component system, which is the big one that most people are afraid of, because it's a really gigantic architectural change from data-oriented design compared to object-oriented design. As far as that,
did someone say performance by default?
We finished this question now. Move on to the next.
All you gotta do is say dots, and Johnny just pops.
It's a shame we just explained the whole thing, Johnny. You missed out.
No, we didn't. We were literally about to get into why data-oriented design is different from object-oriented design and why you should care about this. So, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, data-oriented design, it's different than a traditional object-oriented programming mindset. Basically, object-oriented, the way I usually describe it is like it makes most sense for like us humans to kind of understand and wrap our heads around, just because it's kind of similar to like how we interact with objects just in the real world. Everything kind of has some certain properties about them. They have like, certain functions things can do. You think of like a car, there's like a top speed for a car, and there's like, functions associated with it, like, move forward, drive backward, things like that. Whereas a data-oriented mindset, we're kind of like breaking things up in such a way that actually makes it more efficient for the computer to, store the properties and process the data associated with them. So, when we talk about the entity component system, which is kind of like one of the main data-oriented programming patterns, it's basically a separation of entities, components, and systems, right? So you have these entities, which basically are not really anything. They're just kind of like a way that we can kind of reference component data. And
Kind
then
of like a game object, right?
Yeah, you can think of it similar to a game object. But a game object kind of like owns, the data and the
It doesn't really have
functionality
any.
with it.
It doesn't have anything until it has the components, though, right? It's just kind of like the container for all of the components.
Yeah,
The way
yeah.
the way I like to think of it is that an entity is just a column in a giant table, and then when you add pieces of data into it, you're just filling the lines for that component. So we have like a 2D grid, and one is all the entity declarations, the indexes. This is the first, this is the second, this is the third, and then you have the components. So movement component, speed component, etc., etc. And then just by what you have, what you're filling in, that's what's going to run. Because as we're about to get into, systems are how you iterate over the entities and apply things to them compared to objects that can go anywhere in the code.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, then the components, that's basically the data associated with the entities. And then systems are a completely separate thing. So then it kind of just like takes the data basically as input and does some kind of transformations off that. Could be based off of other data components or just kind of how the system works. And then it basically writes back to those components or some other components as output. And so this is really efficient because the way that the components are stored in memory is all like components are basically stored close to each other in memory. And then the real benefit of that is when you actually want to go to process it, you kind of pull in the data that you're looking for. And then just because of the way that like the CPU cache works and everything like that, it's going to pull in that same data that's close by it in memory. And if that data is kind of the same type of data that you're going to be iterating across for maybe a bunch of entities or something like that, then all that data is already going to be stored in the CPU cache. So it doesn't actually need to go back out to the main system memory to pull that data in again, which is much more expensive than just iterating across that data that's already in the CPU cache.
Yeah, the cache misses are like the biggest problem with object-oriented design. For people who are not familiar with the concept, when you get any data from the PC, the PC has like a certain cache size, which means I'm going to go to that point in memory and I'm going to get the data there, but I'm going to get it in a fixed amount of size. If I only need 4 bytes, I'll still get like a full 64, for example. So when you have to hop around a lot of times in the memory to get different stuff because you're calling different objects in the code, for example, using the example of a car, you have a position and you want to add speed to it. So you have to get the velocity and then you have to multiply it by delta time, which is on another class. And then you have to also update the UI to say that you're going at a faster speed. So now you're jumping to the UI code and now you're setting a string and then you're setting that into a text mesh pro component. And then you're going all the way back to the car object. That's a lot of memory hops, and every single time that you need something from that different spot, you're getting the entire cache of that spot, and you're wasting time that you could have just used what you already had in the cache. So what ECS does is that it says put all the components together, and then systems only iterate on specific components so they can use the cache that they got efficiently. It's less easy to write for humans, but it's way faster for the computer to process.
And I will say another benefit is just kind of like how the data is all structured. Like if you think of a traditional object-oriented approach, if you have, say, a list of game objects, the way you would basically say what that is that's an array of structs. So basically you have a list of all these game objects, and when you kind of like want to iterate through a bunch of those, it's basically going to be like one full game object and then the next full game object and the next full game object. So if you just say want to like update the translation component on each one of those game objects, you're going to have to like kind of make some bigger leaps in memory, depending on how big your game objects are. Not to mention that most likely these are just going to be stored in all different places of memory anyways. But in a data-oriented structure, it's going to be ordered in what's called a structure of arrays, so SOA, which is basically the opposite of that. So rather than having like one full game object and the next full game object, it's going to have all the components of one type are all right next to each other. So like all the translation components are all going to be right next to each other. And then after that, you're going to have, all the rotation components. After that, you're going to have all the, health components. So it really makes it a lot more efficient when you're doing, operations on a bunch of the same component types, because it's just going to go, right through all those same components like that.
Yeah, and if we're going to the data table example from before, standard object-oriented design is just a big line where everything is just small objects, and then you have to make skips. But if you have a data table where every entity index and every component is separated, you can just go for the first line, then the second line, then the third line efficiently with no skips at all. So yeah, that's what ECS is scary and difficult for everybody to grasp initially. But once you get past it, it's pretty okay to work with. It's just a different mindset. As far as when is a good time to start learning dots, again, before it's popular is the ideal, but you can use jobs and burst right now with no problems. They're not experimental. Dots is the only one that's going to change on you and isn't recommended for production right now.
I mean, entities.
Yeah, sorry, entities.
Yeah. Yeah, and jobs and burst, it doesn't require that whole like data-oriented mindset as of right now. You can still kind of like integrate it with, your existing Unity projects.
All right, we got another question. Let's pop this one up. So, have you seen the Neuralink monkey clip? What do you think the implications of that are for VR? Have you guys seen this?
That you'll start playing VR with monkeys. That you'll start being able to play against monkeys that have chips implanted into their brain. Yeah,
you're going to be the monkey with the chip in your brain.
Yeah, eventually.
The implication.
Yes, I have seen the clip.
I will be that monkey.
Is interesting, depending on where you stand on doing stuff with monkeys.
Yeah. Where do you stand on the non-monkey side of it? The tech for humans, is it?
Yeah,
passing over the monkeys, like on the tech actually being in humans and working. Assuming it's all working, no negative side effects, and actually functional. How do you guys feel about the idea of tech that's just kind of directly interfacing your brain to a computer to either make you control things or to make you see things and experience things? I guess those are kind of like two separate things. But like
I was about to say,
things like muscles and stuff is different. Go ahead.
I wouldn't use the dev kit, that's for sure.
No, you don't want the DK1?
No, I don't want the DK1 implanted in my head.
NK1.
I'll wait to the CV2 or something like that, the consumer version, because I don't fancy having it. It's going to happen.
Line of people ready to shove it in their head though and test out version 1, without a doubt.
It's going to happen. People already insert chips into their body for RFID and things like that. There's some great talks on having that stuff inserted into you. I don't personally recommend it, but I would probably do it. And then being able to access your home without actually having to on my YouTube channel, coming next week. Being able to open things and operate things with chips implanted into your body is already a start. Being able to do Neuralinks, there's a lot of implications towards it, but I'm for it because I love all that stuff. But
yeah.
Do we want to know what the implications are?
People is huge alone.
The implication is linking it to your Twitter account and accidentally posting loads of stuff that you didn't want to post, you were just accidentally thinking about at the time. Being able to turn it off and on and realizing you've turned it off, or put it on a silent system. Having Amazon put ads into your head constantly because you didn't go for the premium plan, you went for the free ad-supported plan. You could go on for a while about the things, having it go wrong. Them linking up the wrong neural pathway and suddenly your leg twitches uncontrollably, whereas it was meant to help with your gaming speed when you're shooting people in Call of Duty. We'll see.
I mean, depends on how it works, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with neural links is getting signals from the brain and acting on the signals. So your leg won't twitch uncontrollably unless you also have a prosthetic that says, "Hey, you're getting signals from something other than your brain."
Except if it plays in the thing with neural links is where they link into the brain. If you have it implanted in such a way that it is playing with the neural network, and suddenly the neural network's going, fire your leg on the left. Suddenly you're kicking the guy in front uncontrollably on the plane, and you wonder why. It's because they didn't test it at altitude. I mean,
you could also, I guess, introduce, even if you can't manipulate the brain directly, you could probably introduce some stimuli that makes you like put your leg up, depending on how well you know the brain. This is the more horrific side of things for me. When an application gets to know what you're thinking about what you're seeing, it means that it can start trying to manipulate. By observation, it can see how you'll react to different stuff, and it can start showing you what it wants you to do. Essentially, it can say, well, I want you to punch this thing I'm presenting to you, so I will display what you'll want to punch over it. Which, again, trying to make the implications explicifications, not ideal, but I would be very worried about letting other people see what goes on in my brain just because I don't want to get manipulated like that.
Privacy mode. I don't want people to know what I'm thinking about them. So, probably a good idea to stop that. One-click purchase is going to get really dangerous.
Now we know why he's buying Twitter, I guess. But I think clearly it needs to be read only. But even then, you're right, to your point. If they can read quickly what's going on in our head, even if it's just mundane signals, they can start learning the cause and effect. We get an impulse, a visual impulse, an auditory impulse, some impulse, and then something happens in our brain before we even know it happens. I mean, all the studies already show this, that our brain reacts like a second before we react. So before we even know we're about to do something, the system will know we're about to do something, and potentially it could end up doesn't have to necessarily actually change your brain. It doesn't have to send signals to your brain. It can just send signals to your eyes or to your hands or
receptors.
to your ears. Yeah.
I mean, there
could be scary.
To talk about the beneficial side of things, outside of it, if you go away from thinking about the standard person using it and you think about people with disabilities or illnesses to do with the brain and all the rest of it, Alzheimer's, that sort of thing, there are massive implications. I mean, you look at what they're doing with neurosurgery, where people that are paralyzed from the waist down or even from the neck down are being now able to control limbs because they're having things implanted or they're having artificially generated neural pathways. I've done not a lot of research, but I've watched a lot of stuff about 3D printing and building neural paths that way. There's a lot of benefits outside of the standard person. So if you take away the fact that, yes, it's very scary, and we're all like, great, Twitch gaming is going to be amazing, and suddenly I don't need to use a controller or a keyboard. I can write code even faster than I can with my hands. The implications for people that are suffering with mental illness or disabilities, this is a potential game winner for that side of things. So, good with the bad.
Yeah.
You'll buy a lot more stuff on Amazon, but some person will be able to walk again.
Just to touch on the coin flip there, even just for people with mental issues, when we talked about stimuli and getting you to press the one-click buy or punch a thing, they can actually say, well, this person is about to have a heart attack, and quick, give him stimuli that relaxes him or something like that. And just, it can be a lifesaver. It's not that technology is bad, it's how people use it that is very concerning with this one, because it's absolute control over something that we think we are the only ones in possession of right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the idea for helping people who where this technology can help makes a lot of sense. I think at this point we're all a little cynical. The whole world might be a little cynical with technology and how it can quickly be used for just making people see more ads, or to make people mad in order to get a reaction so they can see more ads and such. So, but the health implications are amazing and all for that.
Yeah, just implant RFIDs and everything, and then walk around your house and turn on all the IoT devices and all the rest. Yeah, it's so much fun.
Nice. So let's go over to something, I guess, less existential, something a little simpler. A question about a Street Fighter game or resolution. So it says, in a game like Street Fighter, where you keep everything in one screen and stay at a resolution like a 4:3, how do you handle keeping everything on screen without losing art in other resolutions? So say you build the game so that it works, at an arcade resolution. How do you make it then also work once you start switching out to other resolutions, or maybe you're going from mobile devices or something else? You guys have thoughts on this? What the process? There was a lot of chat about this, about videos that talk about this, but anybody want to give just real quick?
Well, so when we're talking about frame fitting, it's happening all the time when you're looking at Restream, when Jason is moving us around and changing our sizes. But basically, you have a canvas, and this canvas can only draw so much. When you're drawing a 4:3 picture, you're saying this is the scale of what I want to draw. And when you're changing to 5:3, then you just gain the unit. You don't have anything to draw there. So either you have to draw more to fit that space, or you choose to render something there that you had no plan for example, black bars, because maybe your game doesn't have something to show there. If you choose to render more things there, then obviously you're going to lose them if you're going back to the original resolution. You made them specifically for that change in your canvas ratios. In regards to 16:10, you just figure out how to stretch the things to match, because 4:3 can fit in 16:10. It's made for either 16:12, or if you're trying to do the comparisons, like 13:10, 13 point something. So you'll end up with some margin that you didn't plan for. You either fill it up or you keep it dead. There's nothing else you can do.
Yeah, safe area.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a problem that comes up a lot of times when you hear about like a remake of a game, when they try and remake. I think it was like a big problem with like one of the early Diablo games, is that basically because it was designed with a 4:3 resolution, the developers did a bunch of tricks where they had, kind of things like just barely off screen, maybe like in a T pose or something like that, or like when it basically went out of that 4:3 area, or like just disappeared or something. So then when you go to like a modern 16:9 standard, then you'd see all those things, slightly off screen that you wouldn't necessarily want the player to see.
Yeah, there's also games where like they were so old that you would render everything dynamically, and there was literally nothing there. So if you got out of the bounds, you'll see like objects teetering on the edge of black. Like there would be the background and it has a sharp black line, but characters that go out of it like aren't obscured by that black line because the whole sprite is still rendering. So some games will literally render over that, or they'll do something a bit nicer, which is at least in my opinion, blurring out things as you get near the edges of the view, so it still has the same color fuzz test pass. Like it has the colors of the scene instead of being black on the edges. I think that's a nice way to handle those kind of things.
And if you're releasing on PC, you can always just make it windowed and not let them maximize it, and then keep it at your 4:3 and never leave.
and then see the bazillion complaints about widescreen because apparently you have to support 30:9 resolution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I always get frustrated when they don't support it.
One of the biggest things with widescreen support, which is still beyond me to this day, is how do you handle UI sensibly there? Because there are a lot of games that will try to do like UI that slides off the edges of the screen, and it has no floating mode. You aren't putting it outside. But now you're in widescreen. What do? Do you add a floating mode? Can you change it so it makes sense? It's a big thing to think about.
I always end up playing in a little window on my monitor, so it kind of sucks. But it's the only solution I found. I wanted to take some more questions, but first, just really quickly let everybody know the giveaway is already running. You see people are kind of joining in. The people who know the keywords are typing them in and picking their race and class. It's a giveaway to win a copy of JetBrains Rider. We run it at the end of the show, so everybody who really anybody who chats gets entered. But if you want to pick a race and class, you can just type them in, and then you'll show up as that character, and eventually we'll get so full that people will probably start stacking up because I didn't fix that issue from last week. So you guys want to take the poop question now?
Funnily enough, I was hired to do a Connect game that never actually got released in the end for a company way back. We're talking Connect 1. And at that same studio that hired me to do this prototype, they were also doing a Connect game where you were a bear. And you had to actually act like a bear, and you would go and dig up stuff, and you would go and do things. And it was for kids. I can't remember if it got released. I was just actually looking up to see if it got released to see if I could actually mention it, but I can't find it straight away. So, and it was a long time ago, so I'm not going to mention it just in case it never got released because NDAs and getting sued and stuff like that. Yeah, so I did actually work on a game where you were a bear. But what would be the best approach to make a bear poop feature?
So specifically, he's talking about tracking the player down for enemies dynamically, and this is basically a breadcrumb for the enemies to follow. If you want to think about it in less gross terms. So
we all poop your eye. It's fine.
Sure. But when you're talking about navigation for units, leaving them. I essentially already said it with what I said earlier, but breadcrumbs is how we call this kind of system. And basically, you're setting points for a unit to follow in case it has nothing. So what you'll have usually is a unit roaming around. It has no stimuli, no target to reach for. It just goes forward. And then it enters a radius of something that says, I am an interest point. Go look at me. And then the unit will go towards it. And from that stimuli point, it might get another one and another one. And that's the breadcrumbs that we mentioned. And it will end up following the path that you gave it from those kind of stimuli. So this is basically how those kinds of systems work. And they're used for a lot, not just stealth games. For example, in Warframe, a game with ninjas running over walls and jumping and doing a lot of backflips, they actually have partner AIs that run around and fight with you. And those partner AIs will use the player's own movement, the jumps that the player makes, and the wall runs the player makes to know how to reach the player. The player leaves breadcrumbs essentially in the code that says this other ninja will also use the exact same path. And then the player can say, oh, wow, they're so smart. They're using the same strategy as me. I must be doing something right. It's empowering when you do this kind of system right.
I was wondering whether they were actually talking about the design of how would you make it so that would you resist pooping, or would you just poop on demand on a certain time, or is it how much you're eating? I mean, are there design implications around that, and how would you design
get
that?
really in depth with this feature?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, depending on the implementation you go for.
Is there a skill tree that you can upgrade your
to resist pooping for a certain amount of time?
Track.
So
it's a quick time event. That's what I'm going to say.
So on that note, the way that you implement this will change how your game plays a lot, because in games like Hitman or Yandere Simulator, the player can introduce stimuli by, say, throwing a rock at a certain position, and then when the rock hits the floor, it makes a sound. So all the NPCs end up looking at it, and then it lets the player stealth around from behind the target. So controlling where you do it or when you do it has big implications compared to when you don't. When you're saying that it will be a clue for enemies to track you, it's probably a sign that you don't want the player to be able to control it that much, at least not where it is or when it is, so that the enemies can actually gain benefit from it. Because if the player can manipulate it, then it ends up being a tool for empowering the player rather than a clue for enemies to track you.
It's a eat versus poop. If you don't eat enough, you starve as a bear. If you eat too much, then you get it out. It's an interesting skill tree mechanic. I think it's something that this guy should just make a game just on this. This is the whole mechanic of this.
Sounds great.
Kids will love it.
Bear poop mechanics, huh? So, Johnny, maybe you got some thoughts on this one. I'd give you a chance to talk on something. It says, I want to make an RTS, and you recommend Unity EC, or I guess the question is, would you recommend Unity ECS to handle units, pathway, and AI if you were building an RTS? Or would you build an RTS in ECS? Is that where you would go first, or how do you feel about that?
At this point, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the first place that you should look, Unity ECS, just because it is so, experimental. But I will say that RTSs are definitely a fantastic use case for, a data-oriented type, mindset and something like Unity ECS. Just because, most of the time you're going to have, a lot of entities, when the battle gets really hectic, your team and your opponent's team, they're going to have a lot of entities, doing a bunch of things, especially if you're doing any kind of like networking, just kind of streamlining your, technological approach to, how you create the game. I definitely think an ECS is good for that type of thing. And yeah, especially if they're going to be doing a lot of, pathfinding, AI, and things like that, you can, easily multi-thread that in an ECS structure. So it's definitely something that you should look into. But if you can accomplish it without using ECS, that might be the safer approach for now.
Yeah,
What about you, Andrew?
really depends.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
All right,
go
go ahead. You got something?
Andrew, go ahead.
I know what Andrew is going to recommend.
Well, I can't actually see the question. My internet
so
here
they want to
is-
make an RTS. What would you recommend to get started? So ECS is a possible option, Johnny hit, but I assume you were going to have something here to share.
Well, I think it depends on your skill level, right? Because from everything I know about ECS, that's like ideal. But if you are going to take 3 years to learn it, then don't do that. Instead, just start making it and see what happens. I don't know. My sensibility for all of this stuff, especially coming from the side of things where maybe we're not as experienced, we're intermediate, we're beginner, we're maybe getting to advanced or expert, but not quite there yet, is to just start doing it and doing it with what we know, learning new things along the way, and trying to get something that kind of works. Whether it's ideal for mobile, that RTS for mobile, I don't know. You probably don't need to go that deep, but get something out that works and solve the problems as they come. That's what I would do.
I thought for sure you were going to recommend something from the asset store though to kickstart it.
I mean,
that's
there
what
are.
I
I
would do
think
first. I actually bought them all to try out to try it to see
Did
how
you?
they were.
I haven't tried any of them, so
Yeah, I find it's worth it just for the starting point and the ideas and being able to kind of like look through the code. But I think you can also kind of scope out and get an idea of the RTS before you start writing your own code. Like, so you can start kind of like scope planning it, prototyping it, and playing with it a bit before you start doing the harder parts of like, I need to make all my units work with the network and set up some AI and stuff. Like, go through and use those toolkits. They're a really good starting point, I think. Even if you don't end up using them for the full long-term thing, but I think a lot of people could probably just use them as their entire thing.
sure. I think with any of the toolkits on the asset store, I would go into it, approach it with that mindset, thinking, okay, I'm going to learn from this at the least. Maybe I'll end up using it, but the reality is, for a lot of us, once you get into your game, you're going to start thinking, well, I want this feature that this doesn't necessarily support, and you have to make the determination whether it's easier to add the feature using that framework that you've been provided, which might be more difficult than if you were doing it yourself, or learn from it, take the good parts, remove the bad parts, and make your own version, or just don't include that in your game and say, okay, well, my game's not going to have that feature I wanted to have because it'd be too difficult to add it to this framework, and I want to use this framework. But I take that as the mindset, and you won't be as disappointed as if you go into it thinking that anything from the asset store is 100% going to have every single thing you need for the idea in your head.
So on a more concrete take about regarding whether to use ECS for handling unit pathways and AI, you're not limited to using ECS for it. You could still have multi-threading and almost no issues with the object-oriented design, just using jobs. As far as unit complexity, I'd say it's the opposite of what makes you choose ECS, because the more complex your unit is, the more data it has to query for making its own actions, the more complex your systems that you try to write will be, the more things you might need to access. So if the game has simplified units where they only run around, patrol, make a basic attack that's just standing in place, making an animation, then an enemy takes damage, sure, ECS that. But if your unit tries to do local avoidance plus, I don't know, trying to do dash attacks and then combos and then shooting free projectiles and then those projectiles explode and then it can dash to enemies that got hit by the projectiles that exploded, that is going to be way harder to do in ECS because you're starting to query for way more information. The systems get exponentially big, trying to figure out which system invoked what kind of reaction, or if you need that on the specific frame to make an effect happen accurately. The more complex your code is, the less I'd say I want to use ECS for it. But it also depends on the scale of your project, because the more units you have, you're going to want to have that multi-threading and that memory cache hits done right. You could go for a hybrid approach, right, Johnny?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd even say, go ahead and try and make a prototype of it. And if you start kind of running into the limits of Unity like fairly quickly, then that might be a good sign that you want to kind of take a different approach to it.
So I want to do a real quick switch here and show something that we talked about earlier, if this pops up. So a minute or earlier, one of the things people were asking about was techniques that we use in the debugger, or techniques that we use to find issues or problems with the code and fix them that people might not know about. And David mentioned attaching the debugger. And while you guys were discussing this, I actually wanted to figure out why my characters in the battler were all stacking on top of each other. So I did exactly that. I hit F5, added a breakpoint right here on line 58, and I'll zoom it in. And I was taking a look through here, and this is the code that tells every character where to go. So it sets their destination, and it does that by either sending them off to the left side or the right side. It kind of goes like, when you see the arena again, you'll see it in a moment. Actually, you might be able to see it in my background there, but it's got characters on the left and the right, and it pushes one off to each side. But then when that fills up, it sends them off to the offstage points, which is just it's a list of transforms. It looks like there's 97 of them, and it pushes them off to one. But the problem is my offstage index is 520. So I went around just kind of looking at this data to see what was going on and realized that this offstage index thing never gets reset, but I actually loop through and do this for every player every time. So when there's a new player, it's inefficiently calling this and reorganizing them all, but it's not resetting that index, and it's what's breaking everything. So adding the breakpoint made this really, really easy to see and fix. So now I can stop the breakpoint, just add an offstage index equals 0 here, or I could hit Shift F12, find the part where I actually declare it, which is right above it. Just delete that and put in int here. And then I can stop playing replay, and my game will probably fix and characters will go into the right spot. So I'm actually going to try that. I'm going to switch my screen share. We'll stop it and then restart and then see if it shows up for everybody. So I just wanted to show that because I thought the debugging thing, it was an actual use. I had a real use case for it that just popped up, and I thought it would be a good time to pop up and actually show it in action. So
yeah. It's actually important to note that Unity supports edit and continue, which basically means while you are editing the code, as you were debugging it, you could say, keep on running after I made my changes, and it will try to take the new code and try to keep running the game from where it was with that edited code. A lot of developers will tell you to not do that because it introduces janky state. Like, for example, if you're already in a bad state, it might not be able to fix it and might just give you more bad information to go with. But it has its benefits. In Terraria, we use that a lot, the edit and continue feature, specifically when we are trying to do visual effects. We don't have a fancy editor that we have a preview mode of. We go in-game and try to invoke the effect. And as we're trying to make tweaks, we'll add a breakpoint, change the code of the particle emission, which is all done manually, by the way. And then we'll press continue and see if the new version is a bit better. And that has huge benefits because depending on how fast this process is, you can just keep on tweaking things as you go for any kind of game-related purpose. Should a player jump a tiny bit higher? Should the particles spawn with a slightly different color? Should they be bigger? Should they cover a bigger area? Should an enemy attack slightly faster? Those are things that in Unity you can use serialized fields for, but if you're in play mode and you exit, you don't get to save any of that. Editing the code does let you do that. I really don't recommend doing everything by code, though. When you have an editor, use it.
By the way, I did not use edit and continue, so I did lose any data from anybody who probably entered in the first like half hour or so. So if you want to enter again, go type something in chat and you'll get back into the fight. You'll see your name pop up if you're new.
Doesn't iterate the chat from the entire start of the stream, though?
It does, but I don't think the YouTube API actually gives me like all of the chat from all the way back at the beginning. I think it only goes back a little while. I can't remember exactly though. Just to be sure, I'd just say re-enter just in case. You can see it in action though. Hopefully everything keeps working. It looks like it still bugs out if people join really fast all at once. I don't know why. I'll figure that out eventually.
One day.
Yes.
You have unit simulations, though.
Got our guys running around. They're filling out the areas at least. All right, so maybe we should jump over to another question here. One that's not about bear poop. So this person's been learning Unity for a while, and they want to learn pure C++, but don't know how big of a leap that is as a programmer. And I'm not sure why they want to learn C++, but I thought Dave might have some thoughts on how big of a jump this is. Like, what are your thoughts here? So you're already a Unity dev, you're doing C# stuff. You want to jump into just writing pure C++ code.
I actually went the other way. I went C, C++, C#.
I did the same.
Yeah, I mean, we're old. Start. I mean, it's not going to hurt to jump in. It's a different. I mean, you have to know about a few things. Pointers start to come up, and memory management, and all the rest start to become a more prominent aspect of your development. But there are a lot of standard template libraries, SDLs, that you can basically jump into to do a lot of that stuff. It depends how easy you're finding even just doing C#. And also, before you even start doing it, why? That's the main question. Ask yourself, why do you want to learn that? Are you planning on doing a lot of Unreal development and therefore you want to learn some C++ to start hitting that up? In that case, I would say, go and start doing some Unreal, see how that plays in, see how much you have to dive into, how deep you have to go in your C++ journey. There's a lot to cover on most languages. If you know how to do object-oriented languages, then you can do other ones. You know the methodologies. But there's a lot you still have to learn. So if you're just doing it because you want to do it, then fine. But if you're doing it for a particular reason, think about what you're going to get out of that reason and come out with. It's different for every person as well. I don't find learning languages too hard, but I know other people that do find learning languages hard. So weigh it up. What do you want to get out of it? Then put that effort towards that.
I'd like to add, though, once you know at least one language, all the other languages should be easier because you know the concepts. You know you're just manipulating information and you're just writing it fancily with slightly different fancy signs and characters in the way. C# and C++, are different, but they're not that different that concepts will be entirely arcane to you for the most part. There might be signs that you don't recognize. Go look up what they do. But it's really just code. You're still going to be manipulating ints, making counters that go up, resetting the counters, and then invoking some action. And that action might want to have another object, and that object might want to do other things. That's all still there. It's just written differently. And with C++, the traditional fear invoked by many beginners is that, oh, you have to do everything manually and garbage collection and all that, but and pointers, oh no. But it's really not that bad once you calmly rationalize and go step by step on what you're doing, figuring it out. Like in less than an hour, you can get comfortable with it and just not worry about it again. I really don't think that people should be afraid of trying to do language swaps, and it's not a big leap at all, in my own opinion.
Yeah,
I find that sometimes one of the things that gets people is they're doing Unity editor stuff and they're doing the C# and all the rest of it. And then they go to build their own application or their own game engine or anything like that. And it's just losing that editor and starting from scratch and having to do all the bare knuckle stuff. And that would happen unless you're, as I said, you were doing Unreal 5, then you're going to be adding on to that editor. So sometimes it's not even the case if somebody wants to just learn the new language or such, but they're also going to learn the new paradigm of I'm not got the backing of an engine that's compiling all this stuff and doing all the rest of it. I'm going to be running it all myself. So that's an interesting one to do. I write a lot of C# applications that have nothing to do with the editor, that are standalone. Maybe try that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say it really comes down to, you know, what's your end goal? Like, do you want to be a game engine programmer? Then yeah, sure, you know, go take some time to, you know, experiment making your own, you know, maybe small little game engine in C++ or something like that. Or, you know, do you want to, you know, get a AAA job working on an Unreal game? Then yeah, you know, start experimenting with some Unreal stuff a little bit. But you know, if your job or if your end goal is to just make like a fun indie game and you have a lot of experience with Unity, you know, I'd say just kind of leverage that and build something cool with that.
So here's another question. There's a bunch of them. There are tons coming in, so I'll try to go somewhat quick through some of these. Is there a way to check the value of a scripted variable on a prefab object before instantiating it? So you got an object you want to instantiate. You want to check the some setting on it, some variable that you've got on some script there.
So here's the thing. When you have a prefab that you want to instantiate, you have that prefab. It's literally just a game object. It's just in an asset mode, and you're getting a copy of it when you're calling instantiate. You can instantiate things that are already instantiated, by the way, and it's just making more copies of them. So you can do everything you do with an already instantiated prefab without an instantiated prefab. Just be careful, because if you're manipulating the information on it, it's in an asset mode right now, and it's changing the asset in your project permanently. Well, it doesn't call editor dirtying, but if you save at any single point, it will save that change, which has its uses. But the point in case here is that you can say prefab.getComponent your script, and then that component get that field, do something about it.
That's why I always wrap those with a property, though. I get only a property and I make them private and serialized so that I don't accidentally change them. So if I want to read them, I don't accidentally modify them. I've done that before, and it wasted a half a day to a day of work where I was sitting there trying to figure out what was wrong and realized my code was modifying the prefab and breaking things over and over instead. And that was my lesson.
Oh, by the way, on that note, did you know that you can serialize field a property on mono behaviors and the likes?
I did not know. They added that now? When did that get in?
If you do field : serialized field, then it will show the backing value. Like it will show the property in the inspector for you to edit, but it's going to be a property in code. So
okay,
there you go.
That's awesome. That sounds like a new short to make. I did not know that. I'm gonna have to start using that right away, because then you could do the get only property and save a whole line of code. Oh, yeah, I learned something new. All right, everybody should hit thumbs up for learning something new. Here's a super chat that came in. Oh, go ahead, Dave. You got a question?
I was going to say that's why you do these videos, just to get ideas for new content.
Without a doubt. Like it's so, and just for my code too. Like I get ideas on how to fix stuff and make things better. It's great. The super chat came in though, asking, what about teaching people multiple language, like for beginners? So if somebody's starting out and you wanted to teach them, would you teach them one language, stick to multiple, or they're like maybe a subset or two languages you would put together to teach them or show them how it works? Or
what do they want to do? I mean,
say they want to be game devs because they're watching us.
Yeah, I suppose. I was just thinking of the fact that a lot of the things I do are hardware as well. So if I'm going to be teaching somebody and they want to do, they want to start building their own chipsets, or they want to work on Arduino, NetDuino, or something like that, then I'm going to pick the language that goes towards that. And even if they want to be a game dev, what sort of games are they going to want to make? What are their levels and all the rest? Unreal, Unity, and all the rest. Personally, I go for C# a lot. It's just a preference I have. It's not the de facto choice. It's just the preference I have because I do an awful lot of Unity stuff and I do a lot of standalone applications that are very easy to knock up in C#. Yeah.
So my own approach here is saying if you have to teach someone more than one language, choose two languages that are roughly similar, just to show that they are different, but you're doing essentially the same thing. Here is how it looks here. Here is how it looks there. They're identical in regards to what they do. Don't be afraid of it. It's just different signs. And then when they build confidence in using the language to manipulate information as they need to, for example, making life go up, making damage go down, etc., then you can introduce them to languages that are structured differently. For example, Python or Lua, where everything is like data tables. That you can access in any format. But if I am going for pure beginners, then like David, I would go for C#, personal preference, and I think the language is clean and easier to explain than most others. And then Java, because it's C#, but C#.
Yeah, the other thing is if you're trying to teach different sort of paradigms, like you could teach C#, but you could also teach Haskell if you're trying to show somebody what a functional language is in comparison to, everything else.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's a beginner,
if you're a student,
I would.
Yeah. So when I was at university, for instance, we were doing both Java and we were doing Haskell at the same time. We were also doing Pascal and C, but we had both sides because we were just they were trying to show us these are the different types of languages that you could actually do and play with, etc. And I know you just mentioned that you're teaching a student and you're teaching them JS, but yeah, C#. I agree with you. Right.
Yeah, I'd say that was Dave's experience was like kind of similar to mine when I was in college. I felt like there were a bunch of classes that I was taking, and so like the algorithm and data structures classes, those were all taught in C++. Some of the higher level game programming classes, we were using Unity and C#. I was also doing like some level design classes, so we were doing a bunch of like game maker stuff, and then I was also doing some like web development, so doing some HTML and PHP. So I was kind of like experimenting with a lot of different languages in a fairly short amount of time. And I feel like that was pretty good for me to just kind of like be able to kind of like compare them, see what some languages do better than others, and, see the similarities between a bunch of things. And I feel like, just kind of having that exposure to multiple languages like that, it's been easier for me to, learn more things as my, development journey continues. So I'm not like, super scared when looking at a new, language or something like that.
But Haskell's horrible, by the way.
I've never even heard of that until today, to be honest.
There you go.
I do want to touch, though, that I was trying to look up what my curriculum back when I was at high school was, because that's when I started learning programming at school. And apparently, the first year... So in Israel, at least, we have this system where we do a Bagrut test, which is basically... directly translates into adulthood test, or finals, I guess you'd call it in other places. And you get units depending on how complex you touch on every field. So for example, I did 5 units in computer science, and in there, the units are split into like different tasks. So, for example, we have 2 points in C# and then 2 points in working with C# with something else, like networking or whatever have you. And we have 1 point that was on my curriculum at school for Visual Basic, which, I mean, it should have been the beginning, but it was my last point because the teachers determined that learning C# is going to be way more useful long term. And then once you know C#, you can just take a spreadsheet that says, here's the syntax for Visual Basic, study it for a day, and go do your test. And that's exactly what I did. I studied Visual Basic for the syntax for roughly 2 hours. We got to take paper into the test, like notes. So I literally just had all the syntax for Visual Basic, just taking it with me into the test. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Perfect score. Because you can see it's the same concept, just different implementation.
Talk about horrible languages, Visual Basic. Oh,
yeah.
It was handy for learning, though. It was definitely easy to learn in.
One of my first jobs was, funnily enough, in Visual Basic. They were doing it was an aircraft parts company, and they needed somebody to come in and do SQL statements and build around all their UI and put in the Visual Basic and stuff like that.
I was
horrible.
doing some at Intel
to
do test automation. It worked, though. It was easy to switch back and forth, and it just worked. So
paid the bills.
Let's
never do it. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take this question. It'll be quick. It says, which version of Unity 2022 would you recommend, or what version would you recommend of Unity to use? And I would just go with the latest beta, but I think that there's probably going to be an official release sometime soon. It's got to be coming up. We're already in May. I assume it's going to be sometime soon, so just keep an eye out for that. But I've also been using the LTS of 2021, which is really nice. But 2022 has some neat features. Every now and then I accidentally open up 2020, and I realize it after about like 5 minutes, and I start to look for things like, wait, why aren't these working? Where are my namespaces? And stuff stops working. But yeah, have you guys switched up to 2022 yet?
Yes, so I mentioned it last week, but as I was trying to make something work with the new quick search feature, I decided to check out the latest alpha. So I am on 2022.2 alpha 10. Generally speaking, if you're not using LTS, I'd say just go for the latest thing that's available, because when you're on those bleeding edges, you get to see all the new tech to have fun with it. But if there's a bug, you can also enter the giveaways of, hey, I found a bug, maybe I'll get something for it. If you're not going to use a stable version, might as well, right?
Yeah. And on that point, for people, I use 2021 LTS because I need stuff that's going to go out into the wild and be released in a very quick turnaround. If it was a very long project, I'd probably look at 2022. But as most of my projects go out with 3 months, 6 months lead time, I go for the latest LTS, and I know 2021 just switched over. So,
yeah, I would also suggest that even if you don't think your project's going to be released for a while, stick to the LTS unless you're okay with dealing with potential, breaking bugs and having to figure out what the hell is going on when something just randomly happens. You have no idea why.
On that note, everybody should use source control and be ready to upgrade your engine as it upgrades. For God's sake, do not stay on an outdated engine version. It's the worst thing you can do to your project. You're losing out on so many benefits. And you can make the swap, and if something goes wrong, track back to where you were, where everything is nice and peachy. So really
just make sure that source control keeps enough timeline in the past, just in case you don't find the breaking bug for a month or two.
Yeah, that is a thing. Yeah.
All right, here's a simple yes or no question. Can I earn 150,000 or more working as a gameplay programmer?
Yes.
I know at least 3 people who do. So
depends how good a gameplay programmer you are.
And how big a company you work in.
Yeah. But if you're a rubbish gameplay programmer, then probably not. But if you're
you could be a bad gameplay programmer in the right area.
I suppose.
There are single indies that can make this much if they're the top end, and there you go. I guess every single big indie.
But yes, I would say without a doubt, I would expect like I don't know or everywhere, but my general is you're going to be as a gameplay programmer at a real game company over 100,000 easily, and 150 at the senior level at least, and probably higher now with all the inflation crap that's going on.
And don't expect that off the bat, though.
Yeah,
You
definitely
will
not
get
off
that
the
as a
bat.
junior.
No,
you will not get that as a middle.
as a senior one. Yeah, I would
Eventually you'll
say
get that.
80
So-
to 120 as a junior, depending on where you are and where it depends. It's
California.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm so used to like LA, San Diego, San Francisco prices. Right? Like,
There's something to be said about how competitive the field is getting, because there's a bunch of games coming out and big companies are trying to get the biggest game that's going to be really, really good. So gameplay programmers are essential. It's just how essential are they to the companies that are trying to make them? Because some companies would just try to make money milking projects these days, but they will pay a ton for people who know how to do that well. So it depends on what you're trying to make with the company that you're working with, to how much you'll gain, depending on how big it is. Again, if it's a small company, you'll probably get a bigger share of it. So if the game does well, it's pretty easy to reach, but it's not the common case right now.
No.
It may make sense as well to look for companies that's like advertised that you can live wherever you want, especially if you're already in a lower cost area. 150K in San Francisco is not the same as 150K in most places. You're going to pay a lot more for your rent and stuff. So it might be a smart idea. I just read Airbnb says their employees can live wherever and be paid the same amount. So if the studios are advertising that, even if you're not making 150K, maybe a little less, but because you're where you are, the equivalent is that you're making more in the end.
And don't forget, you don't just have to stay in the games industry. There's enterprise out there as a gameplay programmer. You can earn a good wedge of money from enterprise level applications using Unity or Unreal.
Yeah, it's definitely more than possible, though. But we lost Andrew there.
There we go.
Yes. Coffee break.
and on the remote part, by the way, almost every game company that I've talked to is either open to remote or fully remote. Most of the people that I know that have gotten new game dev jobs, I can only think of one that's not remote. All the rest of them are just working remotely now. And I'm sure it varies from place to place, but
I've seen a few that are starting to talk about hybrid again now, where you're going to be in the office every now and again and work remote the other time. That's starting to become a sort of de facto, and that's starting to merge across the industry. So, grain of salt thing at the moment, I think. We're at that transition phase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the smaller companies are even more open to remote stuff because they don't have to pay for office space. It's a huge like, the cost of an office is like the same cost as hiring multiple developers. It's better just keep them remote.
It also has huge benefits for the workers' happiness and productivity, as far as I can tell. Like, there are the initial difficulties of getting someone used to working remote, but apparently, like, with the addition of trying to work less hours per week or less days per week, people can focus on just doing the work and transitioning from the home to the workplace to trying to survive the work after having all that transition and then coming back and winding down. They can just use that extra time to work properly, efficiently, like with their full energy in their comfort zone. Hi, Salim.
Hey, you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a bit quiet though.
All right.
Yeah, you're a lot quiet, I should say.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Slightly, yeah.
Not much.
You guys, you're so hard to please.
No, it's good.
You got to kiss your microphone. If you're using the Shure, you got to make out with it.
It's not the Shure. I'm not in Texas.
Oh, you got to be the Yeti, then you can yell.
You're fine.
The Shure, you got to give it love. It is showed affection.
Pick with presence.
So Aaron commented in chat that the highest paying Unity job he'd ever seen listed was at $225 for visualization of robotic equipment, and didn't have the robotics background for it. But I'm curious, what's the top end you guys have seen on a Unity position? I've seen a couple at 250 and over right at 300, and that's kind of the highest that I remember seeing for like an actual posted position, at least. As a developer, obviously not like a CTO or CEO position as well.
300 as what kind of developer? Like, do you have magical
lead programmer positions?
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen any, but I would guess that if you're gonna get a Unity gig at, say, Meta, you're gonna get stock options, and so they probably pay well, but then those stock options, we'll see, might be worth
they are
a hell of a lot
hiring.
more. Yeah,
I get emails from the recruiters. They're definitely hiring.
Yeah.
So that type of gig, I mean, I'm sure Apple, Google, they all have Unity gigs somewhere in there. Maybe not as many as, who knows how many, but those companies will pay you stock in that, plus a nice salary. So,
Yeah, because Meta's whole like Horizon venues thing, that's all built off of Unity, and so I've definitely heard rumors. I don't know how true it is of developers being hired at Meta for upwards of $500,000 a year.
On that note, on that note, I think I've seen a thread. I think I've seen a thread last year on the internet where there was someone who got an offer for $350K from Unity while he was interviewing with another company. So do with that what you will. There are people who can get these kinds of jobs. It's not common, but it's out there.
Yeah, that's obviously not the starting position. Of course, Aaron was talking about a complicated one there. So, all right, let's jump over to something else, I guess. How about this monetization question? Anybody got thoughts on how to plan monetization for a hyper casual game? Anybody good at monetization here? I guess that's a good question to ask first. Anybody have monetization thoughts? And
so I'm going to spit some hard pills to swallow, but monetization is something that people deal with, not something that people are willing to just dump. It's they're not going to give you money. They're going to say, I want to get your game, and this prompt for money is in the way. Get it out of here. And hyper casual games are trying to get you in this kind of hot state where you're not trying to think, you're just trying to keep on playing. So generally speaking, trying to cram it when the people are at their most I want to continue playing is how you get the most mileage out of a buy button. But please be moral about it. Be sensible.
Yeah. That friction is the whole point. Yeah. That button creates friction because I want to play the game. So
more addictivity, get more money. Yeah.
Well, make something so fun that people don't want to stop playing, and then sensibly show them, if you want to support the game, here is how.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I've actually heard of a term that some companies use called fun pain, where basically you just you're continually playing a Candy Crush and you're getting that awesome dopamine hits from all the things flashing and the cool sound effects and everything, and the game's all fun and easy, and then eventually you hit a point where it's extremely difficult. No matter what you do, it's just you can't finish that puzzle or whatever, and you're just getting really angry because you can't get that dopamine hit again. And then it's you can get the super boost or whatever for 99 cents, just pay that and then get right back into your fun that you were having before.
There's one thing I was gonna
go ahead.
That if you're gonna build a monetization strategy for a hyper casual game, the one thing you really have to do is put in A/B testing. If you don't put A/B testing into your game for this, you will not make the most lucrative amount out of the players that you're playing, that are playing your actual game. I'd done a few freemium games back in the day, and the way we worked it is we actually had somebody, a designer, doing the A/B testing and then making the changes and then turning that around and making sure that game loop was what people were having the most fun out of, and that we were monetizing sensibly and making a good amount of money from it. But without that A/B testing and without looking at your analytics, you're guessing at what people are going to do.
It's
Start
very
with a good guess,
psychological, right?
and then move into your analytics and A/B testing. That's what you've got to do to make the most out of monetization for a hyper-casual game.
Yeah, also read other people's research. You don't have to reinvent wheels. There's a lot that can probably summarize with how other games did it, and they will show a consistent pattern. You can learn from that, start from there instead of starting from the failure point. Also, in regards to fun paying, as you mentioned, Johnny, that's actually a dark pattern where they'll try to give you endowed value by showing you things that you want to have, and then they'll try to take it away slowly, and you'll say, yeah, just give me back that again. I'm willing to pay for it. I've tasted how the good way to play feels, and I don't want the other one.
It sounds familiar. It's kind of like, giving somebody a shot of heroin, and then
I mean,
That's
so
something
I linked to the Dark Pattern Games site. Jason, if you could share that to everyone, that would be great.
Oh yeah, I
but
just
basically,
dropped that in chat too. Can you screen share it and we pop it up?
I cannot. My PC can't handle this right now. Crap.
I got
So
it.
sorry.
Oh, no problem.
So this site covers just about every scummy thing that games will try to do to you, and explains how this works and how bad. It also ranks how bad games are about it. I recommend avoiding literally everything in this site in your game if you want to be moral.
Well, it also
there
shows
are-
healthy games on here, right? If you scroll down a little bit.
Yeah. So specifically speaking, if a game doesn't use its mechanics to perform dark pattern benefits for itself, or extortions, as I'd like to call it, then it can be a great game. But a lot of games will say, hey, you can look at everything that a player can do and insert benefits for us, the company making the game, out of it. So, for example, you can make the player wait and have an incomplete task in their brain, and then they can't stop thinking about it, so they'll come back for a second time in the game. And then when they're coming back to the second time, they're slowly building up a habit of trying to play the game. And then as long as they stay in the game, they might end up wanting to pay more. So you're getting benefits from everything you do, even if it's not just spamming buy buttons. Trying to get more time with the player might end up letting them buy in the end. Trying to get players busy, or trying to get players to advertise that they are playing, will get other people in. Trying to avoid all of this, by the way. I can't stress this enough. This is probably good for your wallet, but not for any soul for anyone.
So which one makes more money though? It's the evil way. That's why
I don't have a soul. First tutorial: teach the kid that's playing the game how to get the PIN number of the phone so they can make purchases.
Question, Mommy, what's the pin?
Yeah.
that's the name of the game, right? Mommy, what's the
Yeah.
pen?
Oh, seriously, trademarking that right now.
Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna minimize that for a few minutes, and then
Seriously though, if you're trying to make genuinely good games, that site is still great because you can learn how to use a lot of game mechanics properly and healthily for the players, and it can build up a really good player lifetime value, because people who like how you do things might want to come back for a second title or a third one, and you can stay entirely ethical for the entire process.
Oh yeah, and I think most people realistically don't want to do the bad stuff. Just
Yeah.
fucking around, but
Why
I think
would
the
you?
majority of people don't want to do that. And when the managers are like, "Yeah, we're gonna do this," like, no.
Also, if you've not been noticing yourself paying a lot in games recently, go read that stuff, because you might be finding how you're getting trapped into it. That said, it doesn't easily get you out. Personal experience here.
I very rarely spend money in games, except for Magic.
So, what's the
Spend a
dark
lot.
pattern the asset store at Unity is using then? Because I seem to be
A lot.
buying an awful lot of asset store
Facts.
assets.
Facts.
It's actually using quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's been using quite a bit. Specifically when they started the flash sales, they've seen how well this works. So now they're capitalizing on it. Here's a FOMO. The sale is ending soon. You're getting limited amount of copies at a higher discount. Don't miss out.
Works for me.
Urgency.
Yeah, works for me
It's-
as well. I've got a ton of them.
Yeah. Oh, the last sale, I went crazy. I bought tons of stuff. It was like every other day and grabbing something.
So
The scary thing is when you turn it on to look at the sale and you've already purchased everything in there. Oh, I've got a
No,
problem.
I was like a third of the things that I wanted to get. I was like, oh, I already got that last time. Oops.
by the way, one of the biggest changes that I actually hated about the asset store, and that's kind of a permanent thing right now, but they replaced the add to cart button to a buy button straight up. So you're making a lot of individual purchases, but really quickly, instead of what people would usually do before that, where they add things to the cart and then forget about it and never buy it, or decide later more rationally, hey, maybe I don't need that asset. Remove.
Is that just for the lightning deals, or is that for everything?
I think it's
Sounds like
lightning
it's
only.
For lightning deals.
deals.
Because I know lightning deals, you have to do the buy now.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's on
Can't
any
add
asset if
cart.
you.
I have tons of stuff in my card all the time.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
looking at any single asset right now, and the big button is buy now in blue, and then there's a white tiny bag button to say
Oh,
add to
the
cart.
part.
Yeah,
oh,
you can.
okay.
But you have to. On the flash deals, you have to do the buy now. You
Yeah,
can't add
on
to
the
cart.
flash deals you have to do it, and it also refreshes every time, so that you panic about seeing the price maybe changing soon.
I think it also keeps somebody from adding all the 90% off discounts to their cart and then clicking buy and gain everything. Seems more fair.
Yeah,
to me.
well, I
That's
mean,
what I would
sure,
do
on the
if
lightning
I
deals,
could.
you could just put it as a separate item on the store in, like, for a limited time, and then that you can't do that trick, and then still the cart keep it proper.
Let's take another question real quick. This is one I don't have experience with. Do you have experience with profit sharing structures for game dev studios? Or anybody pointed any resources for this? I thought Dave might know something, but I have got no idea.
Yeah, so some of this might be the way you set your business up. If you're in America, you might set up as an LLC, you might set up as a corporation, and then it's the contracts you sign after that point. Also, you've got to look at, if you're building a game dev studio, for instance, don't just think of it as everybody taking a percentage share. Always have a percentage share for the game studio itself, otherwise you'll never grow as a company, because you won't be able to build hires, you won't be able to purchase stuff, and also you've got to pay taxes and all the rest of that sort of thing. So there's that sort of thing to look at. There's obvious structures that you can take from building small businesses and startups that you could use to do contracts for having everybody work there and pay them a fair share. I mean, you can also get to the point where you're paying wages as opposed to paying other stuff, and some of that can come into the contracts as well as to post the game itself. I'm trying to think of the terminology around some of the bits and pieces.
I know Dylan was always a huge fan of the pie slicing stuff.
Yeah, and again, with the pie slicing, you've got to make sure the studio is actually taking some of the pie, because you'll have to pay for things as far as the company running itself. So you have to make sure that's in there. But just agreements basically being in place. It's not hard to set those things up, and there are online resources to find free agreements for setting up startups and then moving forward with it.
What about hiring devs from other countries? This question says, what do you guys think about hiring, or companies hiring foreigners in game dev, or essentially hiring people from another country, which mostly comes to like legal stuff, time zone stuff, and other things. So they were wondering, does it happen a lot, or is it a hassle? Taxes. So what are you guys' thoughts on this? Do you guys see this a lot? Are there a lot of international hires?
Relogic.
I mean,
What's
it's
that?
certainly happening a lot now.
Yeah, a big portion of Relogic is straight up remote from all around the world. We have someone from Brazil, we have someone from Norway, we have me from Israel. The company base is in Indiana, US, and now we have someone from Australia. So
yeah, it's definitely happening a bunch now with the remote being such an important thing. A bunch of places I interviewed at recently were like fully remote, and they were all over.
Yeah, the one of the biggest pains with it is trying to figure out a time where everybody can be present and working at the same time, because you get a lot of value from people being able to communicate in real time. A question that might have to wait 8 hours and then another 8 hours and another 8 hours can be done in 5 minutes, like the whole loop, and maybe 5 times more with those back and forth if two people are standing at the same time. So
as long as you establish core hours, it should be easy. But sometimes core hours can only be like 3 hours because of the time zones.
Yeah. So for example, in Relogic, right now we only have 4 hours where people have to be present from all across the world, but it's way different for every person. So for example, for myself, it's from 8 p.m. to midnight, and then there's the person from Australia, it's going to be there 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then for the people in the US, it's 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's straight up entirely different. People have to plan their day around it to be present.
In your legal documentation, make sure you put the tax implication on the person, so that you aren't paying the taxes in their country for them to do work for you as a contractor and all the rest of it, because that can be a problem if you don't have that in your paperwork. But I'm not a lawyer. Go
work on that with your lawyers and accountants and anyone else who's involved in the pay loop. Specifically speaking, though, if they're independent contractors, they might just have a cleaner contract on the tech stuff, where they have to worry about that kind of thing on their own, but you might pay them more for it.
Even easier if that contractor's got their own company.
Yeah.
Then you can hire them as a company, which makes a lot of difference as well. But yeah, there you go.
So here's another question, a more technical one, and it says, if I want to make a PC and a mobile version of a game, should I use addressables with 2 different quality assets? Or is this something that's kind of already automatically done? Or is this something that you would just ignore? Would you just go with one set of assets? You go multiple sets? What's your general strategy here?
There's built-in things for...
Go ahead.
Oh, there's things built into Unity for that. That if it's a mobile build, you can just cut the texture size by half, etc. I think the first question I would always have is the game itself might not need that much differentiation between the two. If it's a huge game with tons of content, then maybe you'll have to have stronger considerations. But for a lot of games, mobile devices are fast these days, so.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the asset quality in the game. Generally speaking, you don't want players getting files they won't be using. So addressables is useful regardless of what you're doing. But if your mobile does want to support the higher quality, if it's a strong mobile device or whatever have you, do consider just having the entire build available and only loading into memory what you need, which is an entirely different topic. And addressables is useful there, yes. So use addressables regardless of what you're making, I guess.
I want to take a multiplayer question now. It says, I'm making a multiplayer game with the new netcode for game objects. What's the best approach for a game where there are hundreds of networked scene objects? They got lots of things, and it kind of depends on the state of what those things are doing. Do you guys have some experience with netcode for game objects yet, or just general generic thoughts on?
I mean, it's ML API, right?
Things. Well, no, netcode for game objects is like it's the new version of
new
that.
stuff.
It's the
Yeah,
next
but
version of it. The next iteration.
New networking.
Didn't you just do a video on this, Jason?
Not deep into netcode for game objects or this specific question, but on all of the multiplayer options.
So here's the thing, though. It had a previous name, and it was called the ML API, and it just got adapted into being called netcode for game objects. Now, generally speaking, it shouldn't really matter, but when you're working with a lot of network scene objects, you're constantly checking, has any of their states changed? If yes, try to synchronize that. And those synchronizations have some tiny overhead every single time, because every single one, for example, is an individualized message. So they pile up. You say, this is the message of type trying to change translation, and it has the size of that. And then there's the position, rotation, whatever have you, that the object that's on the scene has. And you're sending a bunch of them. If you have hundreds and they're all moving at once, it's going to be a huge payload every single time, or rather a bazillion small ones. Not great. Both because you're doing more work with synchronization, and then the networking itself has to do a lot more work to pipe all that into the game on the other end. So what you can do is you can batch the changes with manual synchronization. You're doing a lot more work manually, but you'll get a bunch smaller messages and better performance for it. I think ML API has something for doing that cleanly.
Yeah, and he's talking about hundreds of networked scene objects. Something that I just kind of started messing around with a little bit was the dots networking, which if you want to revamp your game to use Unity ECS, then that could be an option for you. But yeah, I actually just sent this article over just because this is a pretty good blog series actually. If you scroll down, there's kind of like some videos about kind of what they're doing, but basically it's kind of a scene where they have like a bunch of these cubes, and these are actually kind of like videos. I think it's kind of weird, they don't like auto play, but
they're not playable for me either for some reason.
Yeah, I think if you right click on it, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay.
And
there's
then,
probably go ahead.
Oh yeah, so basically this is it's a really interesting kind of article because it kind of talks about some like different approaches, how they were able to get deterministic physics over networking basically. And so they kind of talked about some of the options, some of the pitfalls, and a bunch of ways to like optimize it. So I think it's just like a really interesting read overall if you're kind of interested in kind of doing some networking type stuff.
So in regards to networking, and we're talking about a big scene with hundreds of game objects, somebody in the comments mentioned area of effect only, synchronizing within area of effect only, which basically it's called area of interest for most systems. What you do there is saying, well, the player doesn't really care about the accuracy of information or the frequency at which they get it, if they can't see it, if it's far away, if they can't tell the details from afar. So we can synchronize less there. When the server is processing what to send as far as changes go to each player, it will say, you know what, every second time I'm trying to send something to that player, just don't skip that. And it can save on performance of trying to serialize the information, pack it down, send it up, and then the client also has to do less work trying to receive that. If there's a bad connection, you're sending less bytes, so you get better throughput for the important information to get by without clogging things down with all the other information.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of something that I wanted to bring up for the dots networking stuff. Is there actually is something kind of built in where you can set basically a synchronization priority. So things with like a higher priority, those things will be frequently updating based off of the network tick. Whereas things with like a lower priority, then they won't update as frequently for things that aren't as critical to the player.
There's also discussing about how, in the end, trying to get to the correct state is the top priority, but how long it takes to get there could be put up for debate. You don't have to send data for everything every single time. You can do that like, I think it's called round robin way, where you're just synchronizing all the objects in the relevant space in their turn. And eventually you'll end up in the right state. It's just, how important is it to you that everybody sees the exact same thing at the exact same time all the time?
On the netcode for game objects part, by the way, is my page not loading? I was just going to mention that I think they're actually going to do a talk at the GameDev Guild conference too on netcode for game objects. They had a meeting last week, and it's not locked in yet, but it's looking good. So I'm really excited about that one. I want to see how that's going to go. see what
Awesome.
the built-in solution is going to look like. So, there were a bunch more questions. I wanted to just hit this one real quick though. Anybody know why a MacBook will stay close to 40 to 60 frames a second on an empty scene? Anybody want to tell them why they're capping at 60?
I can guess.
I could take a guess as well.
The refresh rate of the monitor.
Yeah, if it is, turn off VSync. The other thing that I was thinking, if it's an M1 MacBook, I don't think the M1 MacBooks are officially supported yet. I could be wrong on that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on it?
I've never had one, so I'm abstaining from describing its performance issues.
Mine had just terrible GPU, so it also got terrible frame rate no matter what. But yeah, I don't know. I think there was some chat in there about that too. So how about this question? As an indie dev, they don't have a marketing budget usually. So how important do you think it is to have a YouTube channel as a way to build an audience? And do you think the chances of success are almost zero without it? I think obviously no on that, but I think there's definitely a benefit to having it. It certainly helps because you can build up that marketing for time instead of money.
Yeah, so having a YouTube channel is essentially a second job. You need someone to do it. It's if you don't have a marketing budget, you probably don't have a YouTubing budget, as it were. Sorry for being harsh, but what you're actually trying to figure out is how do you get the game in front of people's faces so that it can take mindshare, the amount of limited resources of attention they have, and put it on your game so that when it comes out, they can actually pay for it and buy it. There are plenty of tools for that. For example, having a Steam store page that's always up and showing up in searches so that people can wishlist the game. And then when the game comes out, get a notification from Steam, no involvement from you. And then they can pay for your game. That's one very easy one. As long as your page looks good, people will click that wishlist button. Maybe it will convert into sales. You can also make simple Reddit posts or Twitter posts or what have you. But trying to make full dedicated videos on your game is essentially a second job. You're now trying to record things, which needs the proper hardware, editing so that it looks appealing, which a lot of games will spend a lot of time on because something that looks half-baked, unfinished, etc., in the development process won't be as appealing to click, hey, where can I find more in the comments or whatever have you on release. So just try to make sure that you're picking low amounts of work to get high yield on people's minds.
Yeah, to add to that, think less about it being a YouTube channel and just a resource you can point to and say, there's a video of my game right there when you're in Twitter or you're in something. And when you're showing a brand new feature that you've put into your game that you want to shout about because you want more people interested in your game, putting the video up on YouTube is fine, but yeah, as your SS, it's a job. I mean, that's what Jason just does all the time. It's his full-time job. But the other thing is to track how many clicks you're getting. So when you post links or anything like that, make sure you're tracking where those links are coming, how good they are. So if somebody's going to a forum where you're writing stuff on your website and they're popping in to look at your game, if you can track where those clicks are coming from and then concentrate on those areas, because if you concentrate, as your says, it's bang for buck. If you're doing loads of Twitter posts and you're getting nowhere, but the Reddit posts are really taking off, know that the Reddit posts are taking off and put effort into that sort of area and people signing up and all the rest.
And it's not just the area, it's about the topic that you're posting on too. If you're posting a complex system made with code, no funny visual things, and it doesn't get traction, and then you're posting cute cat patting, and that gets like 100 million retweets, you know that you might want to have more of that because it will get to more people and eventually end up with more potential purchases. So it's important to track this kind of thing and keep an eye out for where you can get easy wins.
And also go to your meetup groups, go to places you can show it. I know there's an indie dev group in California where we are, where we can basically post stuff about our games, and then we can go and show it off at their get-togethers and all the rest, and you can get a good following from that. You might win an award from that. Talk about that award, post that up. Have a look at how Patrick's Parabox did it and all the areas he went to. And Patrick was on the show the other day talking about this. He's made a game that's incredibly popular on Steam and has done very, very well. And he was looking at a lot of Steam articles that were talking about how to market your game without a budget. And he did a lot of those things and managed to get a lot of traction on those areas. He was also making a game that was hugely interesting and had a unique take. And that's another thing to think about. What's unique about your game that you can talk about?
There was a question that group, is that in Northern California or Southern?
Southern California.
Aren't you in the evil place, LA?
Just south of LA, so I'm evil, but nobody quite knows it.
So, speaking of Steam, Hilton asked the question, they're working on an RPG in South Africa with a friend. How would they go about uploading it to Steam? How does that work with the difference in prices and currencies and all that stuff? So if you want to release a Steam game from somewhere that's not the US, anybody want to take that?
Yeah, so right now, when you're working with Steam, the process is probably far simpler than you realize, but basically speaking, you have an SDK, a source development kit, and that SDK lets you say, build, pack your game, and then launch it onto the Steam backend. And that's literally just, you open it up, enter your credentials, and wait for it to do its thing. And then you have a build of your game on the Steam backend. And that backend will let you do a lot of things with that build. For example, create a branch for private versions of the game to share with people, a beta branch, as it were, protected by a password. And then you can set the game build to only show up with that beta. Then you can give people that password, and they can try out the game, tell you, give you feedback, etc., as you're working. And you can set that build just like a beta, set it to release, and then on release, it gets distributed to everybody who has the game downloaded. If the game has a store page, obviously they can click buy, put it in their library, and then get the thing that's on current release state. That entire process is extremely simple. Everybody just gets the SDK. If they're trying to make a build, they'll just show that, put that file up there. In regards to what file actually launches, that's the part that usually trips people up. You literally just set it on the Steam end. It's extremely simple. You're pointing to, from the thing I uploaded, when the player double clicks my game, use this exe and maybe some arguments with that exe. So, for example, launch with Steam decorations or whatever within the game.
Or in beta mode or whatever.
Yeah, and if you don't know what arguments are, go watch David's video on how to have an argument with Unity. But yeah, so that entire part is extremely simple. Now, the prices are literally just a table on Steam backend that you can browse through and edit the numbers as you want. Steam will recommend values for you that are usually pretty accurate to what the countries you're trying to target are. Each country has its own local currency and it has a fluctuating value. Steam kind of handles that for you. You do need to keep an eye up on it at times, and bigger companies will try to charge values that they feel is better for their games in certain countries compared to what Steam will suggest. I don't recommend that kind of stuff because it tends to gain negative traction if you're trying to overprice your game. Something that happens a lot in Israel. Games will end up like 60% up in costs. So be mindful of it.
Yeah, I've always just gone with what Steam recommended. Put it up there, put the US price or the price that I know, and then Steam will give me the values that make sense. Or for the, I don't know, conversions to whatever it is. It was a ridiculous number of currencies that it supports. So you gotta know them all or just let them do it.
Definitely let them do it. I don't know about you, but I'm no worldwide pricing expert. So I'm not going to be doing a better job than than Steam, who also, by the way, wants to make sure that they get the best return on the pricing matrix, right? So
they succeed if you succeed.
Yeah. So they probably have some expert or at least some contractor now and then look at it.
I hope so. So there was a question.
Wins.
A question about Unreal, since the last couple shows we were talking about it, and they were asking if there's any plans to make content for Unreal. I personally don't have any. I don't have the time to dive in or the expertise to make good enough content. I don't know if anybody else has any Unreal plans, so I figured I would just check.
I'm learning.
I'd kind of like to do a little bit of research in the mass entity stuff and just kind of do like a quick little comparison video between Unity ECS and the mass entity stuff. Probably won't do like any tutorial type things, more just kind of like a high level overview on that type of stuff.
Yeah, comparing that mass entity to ECS has been really interesting. I was seeing like direct comparisons to how they do things with the Lambda and all that. They have a 30-minute official video, by the way, showing how to get started with mass entity and an example that's like really thorough. They're guiding you through creating the data structures, making the systems, how to spawn them in the world, how to see that working, and then a bigger project that has units that go around mine houses, mine resources, and then try to build houses with supposedly an infinite landscape that you can just keep on going. And it shows that only units around you get updated more. It has a lot going for it. It feels like the default examples are more robust than Unity, but the code is also way more involved than what Unity has you, where you just build a small, simple system and you just say, hey, yeah, go launch that.
All right. So here's a question for everybody. It kind of applies, and it says, which engine would you recommend for an HTML5 game? Since we're talking about Unreal and Unity, would you go with Unreal, Unity, something completely different? Where do you guys' kind of default? My default is just to go to Unity because that's my default for most stuff. But what about you guys?
My default is Unity, but I have a friend, Vimlark, who streams. He builds them in Construct. And then I have another friend who's using Play Canvas.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of Play Canvas.
I mean, whatever engine works for you, ultimately, right? Whatever engine works for you, that you know.
Yeah.
Or is it learn?
Yeah, most engines these days will kind of work well on HTML5. You can use GameDev, you can use Construct too. I know that in Relogic, the lead artist uses that a lot for his demos and trying to show us things. Or literally just make a small tiny thing on each and show us, hey, yeah, we can do that.
Construct's an interesting one. I've watched my friend building a lot of stuff with it, and he turns things out really quick on it.
Yeah, it's an amazing power tool. It also has like a lot of visual effects for pixel art stuff. Apparently, it's really convenient.
Well, he's a pixel artist, so yeah.
Yeah,
it speaks for itself.
So let's jump back over to Steam real quick. How do you support the Steam Workshop and mods? They know it's possible with Unity. Is that something that's easy to do? You mentioned that going to Steam was simple. It's easy to deploy and build and release your game there. What about adding like workshop mods?
Extremely simple. So the part of work on your end is probably bigger than what you have to do with Steam. Essentially, all that Workshop does is saying, I am uploading packages to you. Just let the user customize how other people see it, and let the players say, download this mod here, and I'll get the files in a folder that I'll consume later. Now, as far as it works on the Steam integration end with Unity, all you're going to do is say, hey, Steam API, give me where the files that I'm getting from the workshop are, and which files of these that I have should I load. And then you handle the loading entirely on your own. So your mods can be simple PNGs that you just load, and they might translate into being a map or just a fancy sticker that players can place on the wall in Counter-Strike or whatever your game supports. But all the workshop does is handle file management for you. players can say, upload this folder that they made with these tags for discoverability. And that's that for the players, code-wise, the stuff that you have to implement for them. On the workshop end, it already gives them all the editing, the screenshots, the subscribing, adding whatever other information that they want. You don't deal with any of that. And then you just get the files. So really easy.
Nice and simple, huh?
Yeah, I mean, what you do with the files is an entire different story. Trying to make your game load dynamic code or assets with way too much complexity that nobody is going to be able to build because you didn't give them the proper toolkit for it. Entirely different story.
I want to take a bigger, less technical question in just a second. But first, I just wanted to give everybody a quick reminder to enter the giveaway. If you wanted to win a copy of Rider, just enter as Andrew or pick your race and class. Just type them into chat. You'll appear in this little window, and we'll kick off the giveaway in like 10 minutes or so. Get it started. Everybody will battle, and we'll pick the winner, see who wins. I think last time Jason Story won. I forgot to send him his code. But first, I guess we're gonna say goodbye to Salim and farewell because he's got to head out for a little while. So thanks for popping in. You're gonna be back soon, right?
Yep. After I get settled in a new job and stuff, should be more available generally. But yeah, I just want to stop in and say hi to everybody. It's good seeing you. It's good meeting you, Johnny.
Yeah, same to you.
So yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys next week.
Nice. Yeah, we'll see you next week. We'll have to talk more about that new job.
Take
stuff.
it easy, Salim.
Yep. All right, guys.
Yeah.
All right,
Fantastic day.
All right, so yeah, if you want to enter, just choose your race and class, copy the people in chat, or just ask a question. You'll get a random one. All right, I'm going to shrink that down, and we'll go to a question. This was the question I wanted to pop up. This is an earlier one that came in. By the way, if people want to ask a question, feel free, and no, it's not too late to enter. So it says, we've been working on a kind of ambitious co-op game for a year and a half. We basically recreated it 3 times now after hiring people. Things changed. How does one stay motivated? So I don't know if you guys have had this experience where you start a game and things kind of fall apart, and then you restart it and things fall apart, and you restart it, and like you got to trying to keep something alive. 3 times is quite a few, but what are you guys' thoughts on how to stay motivated on something like this, on a project that's been going for year? It says it's only a year and a half. It's already restarted 3 times.
You don't restart, you reiterate. This is the difference
here. They could be restarting with new people.
Yeah, sure. But what I'm saying is they already did some research. They're building upon what they already know with the project. Even if it changed drastically, there are parts that they know, now we want to do this, we don't want to do that. It's not starting from zero. Do not call it a restart, like in the sense of demotivating yourself. Good successes are built upon some failures in the way. So you're giving yourself building blocks to reach that point. As far as staying motivated, give yourself manageable goals and try to be sure that with the new people that are hired, the mentality of the team, the attempting to work towards this end goal is felt. Make sure that they are aware of what has been going on and see how they want to take the game forward. It's really about the discipline of not trying to say everything is lost now, we're losing progress, I'm not getting anything done. You can get a lot of things if you split the tasks into small chunks that you can see tangible progress with. And don't say that you restarted because you know that you got some value out of the earlier attempts.
You can motivate yourself by restarting again.
Yeah.
Dig it in deeper. No, Euro's right. Manageable tasks, set yourself goals. Sometimes it's good to have little show days where you show what you've been working on and show it to other people and talk about what you've been doing. When you're sitting there in isolation sort of thing, just building things out, and then you change it or it's maybe dropped or something comes on, it's a good idea to try and help people show what they've worked on. And as Shiro says, a failure is not a failure. It's just a step towards the right answer in a lot of cases. And think about it that way. And yeah, just keep going. Or quit and just start something brand new.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you've restarted a couple of times, if you haven't already, it'd probably be beneficial to maybe do a little bit of a kind of like intermediate post-mortem type thing and just kind of look back onto your development and say, why did we, restart a couple of times and what were we expecting to get out of starting from scratch all over again? And yeah, just kind of doing some kind of meta level analysis of kind of the project overall, how things are going. And yeah, then kind of, go into it with a little bit more of the mindset of making those manageable goals. And I definitely think, sharing your project with other people and, seeing how they light up when they play your game, that's definitely will give you some extra motivation to, want to go back and, continue working on your project.
Yeah.
Totally
And before you restart something or before you rewrite it, sometimes look at a cost-benefit analysis. What are we going to get out of rewriting? Is it just that somebody's sitting there going, I don't like the way you did that code? Well, if you rewrite it, are you going to get a better result from the new code you're going to do? Possibly not. And if that's the case, you really should be avoiding those things and just moving forward with the thing. Perfection is anti-progress in some circumstances. Making progress and going back and polishing can be better sometimes than constantly iterating on something that will demotivate you because you're constantly doing it. And yeah, I know you're going to show the sign, Jason, and that's why I said it. So you could bring out your sign. You paid for that sign. I want you to get the most money out of it. But yeah, perfection can be against progress.
You're putting
it was more than worth $8, but I was muted. I've got to pull this thing up more times than I can count.
Also, if you want a hard lesson there, you really should be considering that failure is just success in progress, as one of the commenters said. In Terraria, I've had multiple times where some items that I had to work on or some bosses that I was working on had more than 20 iterations in the process of trying to figure out how they should feel in the end. There's this one sprite, I think, that's still in the game where you could see like 40 different versions of the same sword. And it ended up not even making it into the shipping. But the code that was going with all of those 40 sprites ended up being one of the weapons in the game right now. So you are making progress. You just might need to divert it into somewhere else. Don't be afraid to toss things that aren't working for you. Do not forget the progress that you've made. It's easy to say I'm not making any progress if you're just looking forward and you're setting yourself back into the starting point every time. But if you look back, there's like 4 different whole tracks that you've just run.
Yeah, you either succeed or you learn. Every time something doesn't go your way, that's a learning opportunity to learn how, to not do something, and so you can do it differently or a better way next time.
You've said that, and now Jason's going to have to print a new sign. You succeed or you learn. I like that.
Boom.
Yeah. Well, I have to go to find one at Home Goods. Gotta go searching for signs. I feel weird because I'm the only guy there with a bunch of grandmas in the sign aisle, like looking around. I'm like, what would be good in my office?
You've got a problem, Jason. You've got a problem. We need to address it.
I'm a grandma. Last time I went to the store, I bought a ladybug and a bee.
Let me know if you come across a sign that says performance by default.
I will look for one of those. They are solar powered, though, Dave. So they at least take electricity, kinda. I got that in this mask that I figured I could put some RGB lights behind. Oh, you can't see it though. That one. I don't know why. It just looked really weird, and I figured it could glow cool. So
you're on an LED kick, aren't you? RGB behind everything. Really?
Yeah, you got to put RGBs behind everything. What's the point of RGBs existing if you don't put them behind everything?
Yeah, true.
Otherwise, you're just doing a disservice to the inventors. That's why they invented LEDs in the first place. So you can make your room glow fancy colors.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure that was the original intent.
Yeah, absolutely.
take this question. Any tips on approaching a new game from scratch? So say this is something that used to be tough for me, like when I was starting out, like getting an idea and be like, how would I actually start making that game? I've got like an empty scene, an empty project. Like, how do you go about like first steps and making something into a game? Andrew, you got ideas there? You look like you're
got
having
some ideas.
You've done this a couple times.
Barbarian
couple
4, he's currently working on it.
Yeah, and I've also restarted things many times. I think the first step is just start doing stuff, you know, like take the first step, go a direction, feel free to step back and redo something when you realize you did it wrong. Don't be ashamed. Don't be demoralized because of that. That's part of the process. Once you get to a point where you're like, okay, I know this is a key thing. It has to be there. Maybe there's a foundational layer of data or other thing that you have, then work on that for a little bit. But I mean, I'm guilty of doing this. It's bad, I think, to get bogged down in details, and better just to, you know, work on something, go forward, take steps back, but keep moving forward, taking those small steps forward. And don't let yourself get to the point where you essentially, you know, spend all your time on things that don't really matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There is something to be said about how you design a starting project correctly, and there are two approaches that I see that are really effective. The first one is to do all the auxiliary, this isn't really the part of the game parts first, so that you eat that cost up, but then you can focus only on what matters in the game. So that would be making the main menu, making the volume slider, making an option to set your screen size, then closing that down. And once you have this play button, you have a working game. It sends you to somewhere, it might have nothing. But from that point on, anything you add, the game is in complete enough state that you can share it with anyone, get feedback, iterate, and keep working on your game proper. If you have a semi-working prototype that's not really working, but you don't have anything auxiliary, nobody is going to feel that it's a game. It might be demoralizing. You can't share it with anyone because it's not ready enough to be shared. It can only be played in editor even, maybe. So that's the kind of stuff that I tend to go forward. Beyond that, there is the focusing on the unknown first, which is something that you do more in prototypes, but can be done for games as well. You start from the thing that you want the most out of your game. If you're saying, I'm making a game where you fight gods and you make use of legendary weapons to make giant explosions, and you start from having the systems that enable that kind of fun, then you can build around it. And that if you proved that it's fun, then yeah, great on you. If you see problems in the way as you're working on just that god mechanic, you might say, yeah, maybe I need to reiterate my approach here. Maybe this game isn't even worth pursuing. You can see how you can take that direction forward. But you're starting from a point where you didn't spend any time on tasks that you might have to throw away, which is the real crux of this approach. You're trying to not waste time either by making stuff that you'll throw away, or you're making it so it's easier to share, but not doing any other task beyond that. So combining these two, I think, is the most successful way to approach this kind of thing.
Yeah, every time we started a new project back in college when I was doing some game development courses, the first thing that we would always do was a paper prototype. So basically, we would create like a little board game out of our game, or maybe even do something where like the person is actually like swinging a cardboard sword or something like that. And so at that point, it's just like really like figuring out certain issues early on about the project, or like figuring out the things that people gravitate towards the most with your game, so you can really iterate quickly, find the fun of your game quickly. And then so when you actually go to create a digital prototype of your game, you kind of know the things to really focus on. And that was another funny thing to your points about creating all the menus and stuff for a game and all that. Like I remember a lot of times we'd create a digital prototype of our game and we'd like show it to our friends who aren't necessarily doing like game development type stuff, and there'd just be like, little red boxes jumping around on the screen or whatever. And you're like, okay, like, what do you like about the game? What would you like to see improved? And they're like, oh, it'd be really cool if there was like artwork in the game. Basically, that was like really the thing that they focused on rather than like, the actual gameplay mechanics of it. So yeah, that was something interesting.
Yeah.
That kind of brings us into this next question. But first, I wanted to show the image that your eye shared.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect timing to choke.
Yeah. So this is an image that's close to my heart. I've been sharing it every single time we've been doing a prototype in Relogic. And basically speaking, this is the kind of approach that I subscribe to. And you can literally verbatim say, here's the kind of progress you want to have on any project that you do. If you're starting from building blocks that aren't going to be useful to show to anyone, that can't be tested, that can't be iterated on until the very end, you're going to end up with a lot of sad states until you reach just that one point of ending, and you might not even know if it's comfortable. But if you're starting from the very basics, in this case, a skateboard, it might be the minimum implementation of, yay, I have something that moves, but you have to learn how to use it, and also it might crash if you don't know how to do everything right, or you might crash, to be precise. Then yeah, sure, it's a set state, but you can make balancing to it. You can make sure it feels a bit better to have. People still have to learn how to do it, but it's easier. Then you keep going on that iteration, so you end up, say, at the bicycle phase. Now you can even take someone with you, but it's going to be really difficult to do. Eventually you're making it easier to access, and then once it's polished, people can just get in, have a good experience, and not have to worry about everything. You can do every single part of that with your game, and every single prototype that we start kind of begins like that. We get something that works, that says, yeah, we have an implementation. Then we can actually play with it a bit, see that it gets a bit more polished and fun, and eventually you can pretty it up and ship it to people who don't know the entire documentation of how your game goes, can still enter and enjoy.
So on this question that's actually up here at the moment, one of the things I find with prototypes is if you're putting out something that has half decent animation and half decent graphics rather than an actual grey box, people will concentrate on the fact they're half decent graphics and half decent animation. If you go for something that's obviously a prototype and you're just looking at getting the game mechanic, you'll get better responses towards the game mechanic because people look at it and go, that's a prototype, rather than look at it and go, that animation's really dodgy, those graphics are really bad, you haven't done that there. So when you're going to do a grey box prototype, do a grey box prototype to get that game loop and to test that game loop and get feedback on that prototype, rather than your halfway houses.
Yeah,
it's what we call.
Go on.
I was going to say, we also have a vertical slice stage in some of this where it's the art, and that shows the art, and that is just concentrating on the art, but there's the vertical slice for the gameplay. Andrew.
Yeah, to that point, you can definitely remove all the stuff you don't want people to see and focus just on the one thing you want to test, to really isolate them from all the other signals that just make noise, especially if they are half-baked, prototype stuff that isn't ready for prime time. It will distract them from what you want to see. But the other thing is to really just watch their reaction. Don't trust what they say, trust what they do. So if they're, if you're, I don't know, just can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if in your game people are playing it and they keep doing one thing over and over and they seem to enjoy that one thing, they keep going back to that one mechanic, it's probably a good thing. If there's another mechanic that you think people should enjoy and they're like, try it once and like, ugh, and it didn't work, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go do something else, then maybe they had a bad experience. They might not verbalize that to you. They might not even know themselves that they encountered something that they should tell you they didn't enjoy or something. But by their reactions to things, by whether they want to do a thing over and over again, should tell you whether they enjoyed it. And that's going to be completely external from the verbal feedback they give you.
Yeah, to touch point on that with a more concrete example, say you have a game with an enemy. just an enemy the player is supposed to attack. The player has two options to attack. One is way better than the other for that specific enemy. But you never told the player that they have that option. If a player stumbled upon it, they might have a good experience. But if they didn't, and they can only use the not effective attack on that enemy, and they go and try to fight it, and you bump up the difficulty and add 3 enemies later, they'll tell you the game is way too hard. There's no way to do this. Why are you doing this in the demo, etc., etc. But the problem was you didn't convey the information to them. It wasn't that the game is too hard, it's that you didn't do something else. So this is where player words don't match with player actions. If you watch the actions, you can see, oh, I didn't provide them the information, therefore they did something wrong, therefore they had a bad experience. I can correct it by giving them the good information. Also, don't talk to people while they're testing. Don't guide them, don't bias them. Crucial.
All right, before we take another question, I want to just start the giveaway. So if anybody wanted to enter this last couple seconds to just put in a race class or just type something in chat in the next, like, I don't know, 15 seconds or so, I'll probably hit the button. So if you haven't typed something in chat, it'll be too late, but you can join us again next week. Let me see. Oh, there's another question popping up. I've still got a giant list of questions for us to go through. So I'll find the next one and then we could maybe hit the button to get started. I want to pop this one up real quick because it's I think it's a pretty easy one to answer and somewhat interesting. People might be confused about it. It just asks, how important is it to know how to create shaders? So if you're a game developer, you're doing programming or design or something, you say you're not an artist, how important is it to know shaders? And you're not like a technical artist, just in general game development.
Not necessary at all.
It's not. Sometimes a little bit of a twist on the question. If your game is very focused on a particular way of shading or looking or rest of it, and that's your job, it's incredibly important. But yeah, no, you can create a game without having to know how to do shaders.
Yeah, and you don't even have to know that there. You can just buy something off the asset store, customize it to your wishes.
If it meets it,
yeah.
So yeah, it's probably not important to know how to create a shader from scratch, but it definitely would be beneficial for you to kind of like understand how shader code is structured, and kind of like, some of the variable types and stuff that are used in there. So, if needed, you can pop open a shader script and make some minor adjustments if you need to.
And shader graph makes things really easy these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's super fun as well. And that's another thing. It is super fun to make cool shaders in shader graph in a visual way. So go and definitely have a play with it.
Absolutely.
On that note, if you're actually trying to ask this in a more broad appeal and not just working on a game, is it important to make shaders? It's really important to make shaders for a good living because shader wizards are like one of the most sought unicorns of the industry. So if you want to go full spec into that, you can have guaranteed jobs everywhere. The VFX artists for League of Legends show their work constantly, and people praise them endlessly, and they're getting paid really well. Because the big games want to look the best, right? And best effects are not just texture work.
And anything that seems complicated so other people don't do means that there's going to be a lot more or a lot less supply for those who do end up learning it. So, I mean, certainly you'll get more money out of knowing something that nobody else knows.
Yeah, and it'll help you get jobs too. Just because of that, if other people don't know it and something it can be beneficial. And then
and your
Johnny,
game can be based around the shader because Monument Valley is a lot of it's around the shader itself. But anyway,
yeah.
Very true. All right, there's a whole ton of questions. I don't even know which one to pop up.
A good one.
Wow. I don't know which one to consider a good one. There's just a lot.
Save for the sequel.
Here, let's start with this one. We're kind of on this kind of theme anyway. So how do you approach when you scale from a prototype to a full game without it becoming a mess?
Guidelines.
Can you elaborate?
When somebody's going to add an asset to your project, or you're going to add a shader, or you're going to add a material, or have guidelines as to where they put that thing, what they do with it, how it's named, how they use source control to put it into the actual project itself. Guidelines shouldn't just be around your coding style or how you code, etc. They should be around how you put the assets in and all the rest. Good tooling is another one. You can make presets for how things are actually imported into your thing. So when somebody's adding a new texture or they're adding a new asset, the tooling actually takes care of a lot of the things to keep it the same and consistent as a lot of other items you're putting into your project. Review how things are going, how things are being put into the project. So if you bring on a new hire, make sure they've read the guidelines, review what they're actually adding into the project and how they're adding it into the project. And if they're not doing it right, tell them how to do it properly. But yeah, my whole thing with big projects is I have guideline documents that basically people read before they start their job, because otherwise you're just looking at a scrambled mess. A good folder structure. Oh, if you don't have good folder structure in your Unity project and you hire me, I am going to hit the roof.
So it's like a coding standards doc, but for the project as well, not just the code.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you said, David, can be summarized in one very simple term: prevent tribal knowledge. If you don't have ways to guide someone new into how your project works, you probably don't have a concrete way that everybody is working on the project right now. And this tribal thing, where half of the tribe thinks I'll work this way, and half of tribes work I'll do things that way, it's going to create problems in the scale that you're trying to have neat and concrete over the progress.
I actually have a Unity tool that when I start a new project, it actually opens up a dialog box with setup, and it has layers, it has folders, it has all these other things that you set up in Unity. You press a button and it sets it all up. My projects are consistent from one project to another project to another project completely. And I vary that as I become better at doing things, or I find a better way of doing something. But up to that point, they stay consistent all the way through, so people can't mess up.
Yeah, that stuff is so useful to have.
I'll make a video about it at some point.
Good.
How useful is a design document? There's another question. How important is a game design document for prototyping? They found it helpful grouping problems and features and kind of working as a guidepost. You guys use game design docs when you're doing prototypes?
Yeah.
Yesn't. So I want to touch on this a bit briefly, but game design documents are not directly, here is how the game design should be. They are, here is what we are going to work on and what we are not going to work on, which is the more important part here. When you're giving someone a game design document, you're telling them you are going to focus on making these systems and not this random wild idea you had that's completely unrelated and is going to distract the entire project, and people are going to have to make auxiliary assets for it, and the entire thing is going to fall apart. So this is why you have game design documents. Now, they're important because you don't want the project falling apart for random miscellaneous tasks. And they help you focus on figuring out what the first goals of what you're trying to have are. So if you have a game design document that says we are going to have a butler system where butlers fight each other and they are in an arena, and that arena has whatever have you, and the butlers have these customization options, you know what assets need to be made now in order to achieve the game. You know which ones are crucial to start testing, so you can say we can't have a game at all if we have no butlers to fight. So you can use white boxes, but the first most important assets are probably going to be the butlers actually fighting. So the artists know, now I'm making the butlers. And then once they have at least 2 butlers that can fight, they can say, now we'll make a basic arena. And then they can scale it up to say we'll have more butlers, etc., etc. The ability to determine small goals that they can achieve in a linear order has huge value. Because if they don't know what to work on, they might end up with choice paralysis, which is the worst case scenario. They have so much to work on, but they're afraid and they're looking at insurmountable tasks, so they're just not doing anything.
Your task is make a game.
Yeah, and make it well indexed as well. because I find that sometimes when you've got a big game design document, there's no contents or index to it. People won't look it up because if it's hard to find that things. And as Yuri said, if I'm creating tasks in a sprint and there's a document about that thing, I will link that in the task to that point in the document that actually talks about that thing. So everybody's on the same page.
It's also why when you're working on stuff, you make tickets in a ticketing system. You're saying, here's a task. Let's go with that task. And if people are making assets for it, they can submit it to that task. And then when everybody wants to check on the task, they can say, oh, it has assets, but nobody made a code for it. We can take that on, and you can give those tasks priorities. So they can say, this is a phase 1 task. I'm going to handle it before a phase 2 task.
Well, I think that's good answers, and it kind of continues on from that last question. I want to take this multiplayer one, and then there was one about weapons too that I want to make sure we get time for, assuming I think we have enough time. So this question was just about what solutions or resources you'd recommend for server authoritative multiplayer. Everything they look at is kind of, my guess is that most of the documentation they're finding is on like peer-to-peer games where it's a client-hosted game where it's either server authoritative on a single client, or maybe it's just all peer-to-peer and there's no server authority at all. So you guys got thoughts on what you would look at or what kind of systems you use for making a server authoritative multiplayer game of maybe a couple of types?
I can tell you .NET code is a server authoritative multiplayer. So
But that's the .NET that's up on the asset store, right?
No, this is the DOTS networking.
The built-in.
Yeah, the built-in one. I think the .NET is server authoritative as well. But yeah, so right now the DOTS networking, it's only server authoritative, but I think there may be plans in the future to have some peer-to-peer type options. But yeah, so I can maybe talk about my development experience with that a little bit, just because I've kind of been experimenting some with it. But basically, so yeah, basically the server authoritative means that like the actual game is simulating up on the server, and then really the clients, who is just, like the people playing your game, they're basically just receiving almost like a mirror copy of your game that's running up on the server. Now, of course, there's going to be, like some latency and stuff like that for, when you move, and then, when it moves on the server, and then when it actually replicates back to your local client, and same thing with all the other players in your game. So then that's why you have to start introducing things like client prediction. And so with the DOTS networking, there's basically kind of like multiple ways that you can do the client prediction. So one of them is basically, it's like called like owner predicted. So if you basically own this, so like your player, then it's going to do that prediction like directly, immediately based off of your input. So if you press the forward key, your player should immediately start moving forward on the client. And then it's going to send that data up to the server. And then the server is going to validate that, make sure everything is all good to go. If it is, it's going to send it back to the client. And then, if there's no difference between that, like the server says everything's good to go, then the client's just going to continue doing what it does. However, if there is kind of like a disconnect between that, when it says like, the server says, no, you can't actually move there, or, someone hits you with some item that was, froze you in place or something like that, then it's actually going to, roll back the simulation a little bit and kind of like, re-simulate things basically based off of that new data that it got from the server. So that's kind of like one type of prediction. And then there's also prediction for, like other clients in the game, where basically it would just kind of like continually moving them basically in like the direction they were moving previously, based off of, the last inputs that it had from them. So if, one player is moving to the left, it's most likely going to continue moving to the left until it, receives the signal that, oh, they're actually moving over to the right now. Then it's going to do, like a little bit of, interpolation to kind of move it back into the correct spot. So.
Yeah. And to be fair, those implementation from .NET and .NET code are amazing, but they come loaded with all those fancy features for you. If you're saying that the documentation is not really clear when you're looking at authoritative multiplayer, I would say that it's probably a problem of not being comfortable with the concept of authoritative multiplayer, because when you're going and checking out net packages, you're getting implementations of that, but they're not explaining concepts to you, they're explaining how to use the implementation they made. So if you have problems with figuring out how to use a package, they're not doing much differently at all. They're just saying, here's how we handle doing the exact same thing as everybody else is doing. So you're probably better off looking concepts of how does authoritative multiplayer work first, then once you're comfortable, read the documentation in whole for one of these packages, and you should be set up. Speaking in the simplified manner, most packages from ML API, which is now the net code for game objects, and the Photon Fusion and Photon Unity Networking 2, and all of these, all they do is say, you have objects, you are sending manipulations of these objects to the server. The server says, yeah, sure, this is fine. No, this is not fine. It sends you the results. And you decide what you do with the results on the client. The point with being server authoritative is just saying the server will not accept invalid things from the clients. There's literally nothing more to it than that. Whether the clients show that or not is your responsibility. And that's not going to change regardless of what implementation you're using.
I was just looking through this book to see if there was there's nothing on the networking side of the exploiting, but I would say read and do some searching for articles on how to exploit multiplayer games as well, because it'll kind of, I think, open up your eyes and give you a lot of insight into how it works and the things that you're actually trying to do. Once you've gone in and like hacked a multiplayer game or added a little bit of cheating there and done it, I feel like it kind of clicks a little bit easier. At least it did for me.
Yeah, just to explain it in super brief, the difference between server authoritative and not is that if there are two players who are trying to catch a trophy or a flag, in this case, and they are about to touch it at the same time, but they have lag between them, they will both see, oh, the other player didn't get on it. I will, within this time that they didn't, run to the flag. They both seeing it late, but the server, the one that they're both talking to, sees the information from both of them. It can decide which one actually deserves the flag and send it back to both of them to know. This is without prediction. They will run up to the flag and they have to wait until the server tells them who actually got it. This
the alternative, they got to decide themselves, or one of the clients has to pick or fight.
The client, the client can predict that because nobody was touching the flag, they can own it. They can show it on the client side. Yay, I have the flag. But this is not the true state. Only the server decides what is the true state, and the server tells you. This prediction is entirely optional.
If there's no server, then they have to go with one of those clients is doing that decision, which can then be cheated.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the clients can say, well, I got to it first because you have latency, therefore I always win, or whatever have you. Just to wrap it all up, authoritative multiplayer is mostly the same between all the packages. Whatever solution you use, it's going to be the exact same. If there's no good documentation, try to find something with better one, but I found most of them to be entirely perfectly fine. I've used Miro, I've used Photon Unity Networking 2, I've used, what was that one name? Dark Rift. They all have proper documentation.
All right, I was going to take a different question, but this one says RGB lights, so I had to click on it. I got a job as a Unity developer, but for a lighting company. We make buildings with RGB lights for clients. I don't know how you become a client. But is this good for my resume to get a job as a game developer in the future?
Yes. So straight up, yes, because first you're showing that you have experience with Unity and that you can interact with hardware, and that can guide you into working on merch for games that could do interactive things. You can pitch anything properly, and you can relate that to game development. So for merch, yeah, if you can make RGB merch for games, might be neat. If you're trying to work on the actual game development part, then you can say, I will build the code that interacts with that RGB merch that you'll let somebody else build if you want to get more close to the game. Just being a game developer isn't necessarily working on the gameplay alone. Just be mindful of that. Game developers have to do a lot more. They have to make the menus, and they have to make sure that when things crash, they don't ruin saves and all that. So it's a mostly generic job.
And
know
also, oh yeah, of course I do.
It's like the perfect Dave question.
Yeah, isn't it just? Also, the idea of making a game doesn't have to actually be an on-screen thing as well. Remember that? There's plenty of games that just use RGB and some neat little controllers to do it. There's a really cool one that they show at 2-Bit Circus, which is an installation in LA, which is just one single strip of LED that goes all the way up, but it has a dot. And it's about who can, when the LED flies up and then drops down, who can press the button at the point that it reaches the dot. Super addictive for groups. They've all had a few to drink as well, so it actually really plays in. But there's that sort of thing as well that isn't to do with Unity as such, but it is a game. And it is addictive, and it is good fun to play. Also, learning how to do things on the side of Unity. We're having Unity talk to controllers and build stuff around that. Whole industry. It's called the location-based entertainment industry. And you build arcades, we build VR installations, we build all sorts of things that have custom hardware that work with that. So, yeah. And somebody's got to put the LED in all the Razer controls. I mean, seriously. They're building gaming peripherals, and you could just have a job just doing the RGB for that.
Well, you've done a lot of things like this that I've seen videos of, where you built these big giant displays that are running off of Unity. Right? Unity is kind of the back end doing fancy, flashy stuff on there, and then you're able to show it all on these really cool displays, which makes it a lot cooler than a little window.
Yeah, the Super Bowl.
Yes. Yeah. Anything like cooler at the Super Bowl on their big displays.
Yeah. That was super fun to do. But yeah, there's lots of work out there. It doesn't have to actually be just Unity on a monitor. You can do a lot more with it.
Yeah.
Specific to the RGB stuff, there's potentially an asset there for somebody who wants to figure out how to make an API that works with all the various RGB hardware out there, and makes it easy for devs to buy an asset and make it work.
I've thought about doing that myself, but it's too much work.
There's a lot of controllers.
Yeah, it's more tricky, I would think, and there's probably more moving parts on the third parties that you'd have to account for.
It's not so much the Unity side is not too hard. It's actually building the hardware side, because the Unity is just sending stuff out to a controller. And that's like sending stuff to another computer a lot of the time. But then you have to write the stuff that receives it.
The SDKs, though, for like these keyboards and with the individually.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Because those are all different too, though. They're all totally different SDKs.
I would lift my keyboard up as well, but it's attached to the desk.
Oh no! Is it crackles down?
This is one of 2 keyboards I have on my desk right now.
I don't have a big enough desk to have more than one keyboard. It's a small keyboard.
I don't know how you work with only one keyboard. How do you get anything done?
I have a Stream Deck attached to the desk as well.
There you go.
Okay. So
and my
when
own
the
remote
programmer
control.
comes in, they just type on that instead of sharing the keyboard.
This is it. There's USB ports everywhere as well, so it's not like I just walk up to a wall and put something in.
Is this the next version of 360 no scope? Only one keyboard, only one screen?
Oh man! So it looks like our giveaway battle is just about over. Let's see. Pop that up.
Am I winning?
I don't think so. I think
I
Bard
must have lost at some point.
Bard's definitely got buffed recently, and I
Rigged.
they're in need of some nerfing. So next week,
Yeah.
we expect them to get nerfed. I might actually get around to swapping out characters this week.
I think you swung it a bit too far to the side.
next week, Bard players have to actually type on the keyboard in order to play music for us in order to win
They
fights.
got to sing the songs. I would love to make it be interactive where people had to do something in there. It's gonna find the time to do it. That would be cool. Watch the assassin win though. That's my expectation. He's a bomb, so
Out.
you can find out that bombs are super powerful. They just one shot everybody. I really want to get special abilities in here though. I think that would be a fun one to code and show with like some cool particles and stuff.
We need to switch up the lights for the next time. Make it a mood. RGB maybe.
Turn it into a big
RGB
RGB
dungeon.
party. I like it. Oh, okay. The assassin's gone, and we're down to just a couple fighters. We got is that Unity developer? Is that what this is back there?
Unity developer.
Yep. Versus Scott. Oh man, this is a long bard fight. Nobody wants to die. Oh.
No.
All right, Unity developer versus Cosmin?
Well, that's cheating, isn't it? If he's a Unity developer, he's going to win.
That is cheating. That's an interesting Google name because that's your YouTube name, right? That's our email name. Okay, who's going to win it? Let's see the final battler. So, Dave, while we watch this battler, didn't you release a video last week? And do you have one this week?
So, yeah, there's the one from this week that's just gone out. And I can't remember what I put out last week.
It's on your channel.
No, I'm getting there. Seriously. And that's the one from last week. So last week's video, do you want to talk about the winner first? And then I'll jump in.
Well, I'll just say congrats, Cosmin and Neil noticing the dungeon asset. Yep, that's what they're there for. It's there to be used. It was actually the perfect asset because it had a nice room. You could put characters up on the side and watch them fight in the middle. So it's perfect.
Sweet. So yeah, 2 weeks ago I wasn't on. That was moving components. That's about adding things in context onto the inspector. So in the context buttons that you have in the inspector, the 3 little buttons, you can actually add things to that. So I added something to that on there. The last week's one was about using the asset database find items. So showing you how to find items using tools and the searchability options in there. And then this week's one is talking about the scene visibility manager that everybody seems to overlook in Unity. So I see a lot of people when they're building menus or something like that, they'll deactivate large swathes of areas in their Unity scene. So they'll go in, they disable all those, set them to deactivated, and then they'll work on the bit they're actually interested in. What they don't realize is literally just to the side of that on the hierarchy is a button. And that button enables you to show, hide, make things non-pickable as well. So they completely miss that. And then even people that know about that don't realize you can actually utilize that yourself in code in your tools. So I show a menu thing on this one where you have several menu pages and you want to just work on one particular menu page. Well, there's a button on the menu page inspector that literally you press and it hides all the other menu pages and just lets you work on that one menu. And then there's one that turns that off and shows all the menus again. So yeah, this is a video, very short video this week. And then I have another video coming out, I think in a week's time, which is about me adding a remote control. So if you're into more hardware stuff, there's something about me adding actually a remote to my desk because I have a weird custom riser lower solution for my desk and all my monitors that actually raises and lowers it up a wall using my own actuators. And I had a point where I set it up with IoT and then IoT was delayed when I was telling it to stop lifting. So I had to scramble and run to the controller, which happened to be built onto the wall because I haven't put the limit switches in yet. And if you don't do hardware, limit switches will basically confuse the hell out of you. But yeah, so the thing was just going to keep climbing until it went through the ceiling. So basically I had to run and scramble to turn it off. So I decided to build a remote. So it shows me actually modeling this thing in 3D and building a remote to lift and lower and trim all the levels on my monitors and everything. There you go. Quick rundown of what's coming out.
That's really awesome. Also, regarding this invisibility tool, I actually on JSON story server, there was somebody who was trying to work on UI and was trying to hide it, but he was angry that there was no hotkey to hide the UI. And I said, just use this invisibility manager. And I ended up writing a hotkey for toggling every single UI canvas object on or off in the visibility manager by pressing the hotkey. It was really, really nice to see that it took very little code to do. In general, making hotkeys in Unity is a breeze right now.
Exactly. So everybody go watch that after this. Tell everybody you know about it so that people actually watch these videos. They're super niche, these videos, so it's not like they're really out there, but there you go.
I linked them in the chat, so hopefully everybody go check it out. My recommendation is you do some of them in the 1 minute format too. Do some little shorts because YouTube seems to like those. I was going to do a short. What was I going to do a short on? I've already forgotten.
Oh, I wrote it down. Serialized field property.
That's right. I'm going to write that down too because I'm going to forget it.
Johnny wrote it down because Johnny's going to do it first.
Yeah, I'm giving people work.
It's fine. It'll just mean that they'll both get clicked on. I like it. That's the benefit of shorts. Everybody will just watch it twice. My wife watches short videos like 5 times in a row. I watch her. She just goes back. Watches
but not your videos.
Again. No, mine aren't that interesting. All right. Well, I guess I wanted to wrap it up by telling everybody to check out GameDev Guild while you still can. GameDevGuild.com. There's a link in the description. Go check out the courses and everything else below. And Dave's videos. They're both in chat, and I'm going to drop them in there one more time. We'll put them onto the description as well. I wish it would have let me just auto play right into them. Other than that, I just wanted to say thanks again for coming out. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, share the stream, drop comments if you got questions or thoughts, and we'll see you next week. Anybody got any other final words?
Oh, I have a shameless plug.
In
the coming week, I think in this week, the asset store's gonna have 2 of my monster bundles out in flash deal for 75% off. Ooh. They'll be available until they sell out, and I think there's going to be 110 available. So it will probably take a while to sell out 110, if it even sells out 110. But Monster Bundle 7 and Monster Bundle 8 should launch sometime this week.
Okay, awesome. We'll put those in the description too. You just send the links. I'll drop those in there. I'll get them in right away. Or sure. Actually, I can go find them. 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And you all right? Did you have something?
Yeah. So last week we talked about the new Unity Quick Search feature on the, and I said that I had a problem with it. Well, I went to the forums and I ended up getting a response from the Unity developer who's working on Quick Search, and he resolved my issue pretty immediately. And right now, working with the search is a dream. Nice. So you can now make gigantic like tables of all the data from random individual objects in your assets, and show it all and edit stats and sort them and filter them and do a whole lot that you could not neatly do in Unity before. So I really recommend everybody go check out Quick Search and what functionality it provides.
You've got to show that next week. That stuff is awesome. Yeah, bring it up and talk about it more next week because that is
yeah, totally.
It is very cool. Johnny?
Yeah, let's see. I just put up a video on Friday about iJob Entity, which is a new way to do jobs in Unity ECS. It's really cool. It kind of uses the best of both worlds from the just kind of regular C# job system and entities.forEach functions, if you're familiar with those. So yeah, it's a really cool new feature of the entities 0.50. And yeah, check out the video if you want a little overview on that.
Yeah, I saw that one a couple days ago. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
And that was someone on your Discord server that worked on this, right?
Yeah. Danny, he's a Unity developer, and this was kind of like his, he basically developed out this feature. He's on kind of the team that does these things, and so yeah, he's in the Discord, and he's kind of been answering questions about people on this, and yeah.
All right, well, I guess we'll just wrap it there. I'll remind everybody to go check out GameDev Guild, check out all the links in the description, and we'll see you again next week. So, bye. Thanks, everyone.
Later.
Hit thumbs up and share and all that stuff, too. All right, bye again.